Chapter 744. Roar. The roar was so powerful that it resounded beyond the clouds in the ninth heaven. Even Winning was shocked and started to count them in person. Damn it, this guy is not going to fight. He is going to sweep the place alone. While counting, Lu Winning swore, but his eyebrows were full of shock and joy. For many days, the atmosphere in the camp of the Empire had been gloomy, tense, and solemn. What Lin Sun did today would definitely have an excellent effect on boosting the morale of the camp. On the same night, Lin Sun's military merits were counted out, which shocked all the practitioners of the Empire in the camp. A total of 29 first-class military merits. And Lin Sun's name also jumped to the 9th place on the military merits list of Camp 7. It should be noted that the military merits of the top 100 had been accumulated for many years. It was not easy for them to obtain a place on this list that represented honor. But Lin Sun had just been in the camp for less than half a year, but his accumulated military merits soared to the 9th place with a stunning exaggeration. Of course, the military merits he got from killing the half-step spirit beasts were also counted. The practitioners of Camp 7 were all excited, their morale greatly boosted, and their admiration for Lin Sun reached an unprecedented level. Until late at night, even the practitioners in the other 7 camps of the Empire also knew Lin Sun's heaven-defying record, which set off an uproar for a while. In the camp of voodoo barbarians, the atmosphere was particularly gloomy because Lin Sun's feat today had shocked many voodoo barbarian kings. Chapter 745. The 3rd place on the blood list. When the Imperial camp heard the news, they were completely shocked. No one expected that a young man in Tao Insight Realm would become the 3rd most dangerous person in the voodoo barbarian camp. In the thousands of years of war, there had never been such an example. Child Lin is too fierce. They put Child Lin's name in the 3rd place on the blood list. Voodoo barbarian tribe is obviously anxious. All kinds of exclamations sounded in the 8 camps of the Empire. Lin Sun's fierce record boosted the morale of the Empire camp and swept away the previous haze. However, there were also people who were worried about Lin Sun. Dolua Continent 3 Dragon King legend, the 3rd place on the blood list. It seemed to be a very different kind of glory, but this ranking would bring great danger and trouble to Lin Sun. How could they let it go after killing so many strong barbarians in the voodoo barbarian camp? In fact, Lin Sun's situation did become dangerous. In the next few days, some dangerous variables began to appear in his campaign on the battlefield. Guhangshan, bloodthirsty battlefield. Whoosh! Lin Sun was escaping. His figure turned into an ice puppet, and his speed was extremely fast. Without that pair of bows and arrows, you were just SOSO. Behind him, a powerful thunder barbarian was chasing him. He was strong, with a beard like a halberd. When he opened and closed his eyes, the lightning was flowing, which was extremely frightening. This was a half-step king named Shi Nanming from Thunder Barbarian Branch. There was originally a team of Thunder Barbarians stationed in Guhangshan. According to the information, the strongest in this team was only a strong practitioner in Spirit Awakening Realm. However, what caught Lin Sun off guard was that when he arrived at Guhangshan, this team of Thunder Barbarians had already retreated and was empty. Only Shi Nanming, a half-step king, was waiting. Obviously, Shi Nanming came here to kill Lin Sun. Lin Shire also has this day. I'm not afraid to tell you that this time, there are 5 other half-step king and a real barbarian king. The only goal is to kill you, little bastard. Shi Nanming smiled. His voice was cold and filled with killing intent. Lin Shire was only at the Tao Insight Realm, but he had brought too many blows and shadows to the voodoo barbarian tribe these days. If he was not killed, it would be a great shame for the voodoo barbarian tribe. Barbarian King? Lin Sun, who was fleeing in the distance, suddenly narrowed his eyes. Sending a king and 6 half-step kings to deal with him? How extravagant! Die! Suddenly, Shi Nanming shouted and threw out a long spear condensed from thunder and lightning. The spear swept across the sky towards Lin Sun. It was unbelievably fast. In the depths of the mulberry forest, Lin Sun had also been hunted like this. But at that time, with a bloody mist that isolated perception and the threat of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow, Lin Sun was able to escape without any danger. But now it was different. In the vast world, there was almost no place for Lin to hide. Therefore, even though Lin Sun had exerted Ice Drake steps with all his strength, he was still caught up with. Boom! The thunder and lightning spear was terrible. Wrapped with dazzling lightning, it smashed the void into pieces, which looked extremely terrible. Lin Sun dodged. With a bang, the thunder and lightning spear blasted a huge hole in the nearby ground, which was shocking. After this, Shi Nanming had caught up with him and said with a creepy smile, "Little guy, why don't you run away? I'd like to know how powerful you are without that pair of bows and arrows." As he spoke, he had already launched his killing move. With a wave of his sleeve, the thunder and lightning arcs rushed out and turned into spears, pressing down on Lin Sun. It was really too terrible. If it were another strong man, even a practitioner of reincarnation development realm, let alone Tao Insight realm, would not be able to resist it. Although Lin Sun was confident, he also knew that without the help of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow, it was almost impossible to defeat a half-step king. Whoosh! Whoosh! Lin Sun's figure began to flash, constantly dodging, but he looked a little embarrassed. How could the frontal attack of a half-step king be ordinary? Shi Nanming's divine power was like the sea, and there was a terrible power of thunder and lightning around him. He was like the master of this world, pointing at the sky and hitting the earth, vividly displaying the power of a half-step king. Lin Sun's pressure doubled. If he just dodged with the magic of Ice Drake steps, he would not be afraid of this kind of attack, but this was obviously impossible. The divine power of a half-step king was too strong, and he controlled the mystery of the Great Way. This world seemed to have become his absolute domain. Even if Lin Sun dodged, his whole body was under extremely terrible pressure. He was like a fish struggling in the ice, and would be frozen at any time. This world was turbulent, and thunder and lightning arcs were pouring down like dense rain, full of terrible destructive breath. Rocks were exploding, the earth was cracking, and the void was in disorder. Everything seemed to be turbulent and chaotic. Shi Nanming was like a thunder god, and his divine power was like the sun and the moon, which was extremely powerful. Lin Sun could only try his best to dodge, and the situation was dangerous. Strictly speaking, this should be the first time for Lin Sun to fight against a half-step king without the help of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow. Although Lin Sun had many experiences of killing half-step kings in the past, it was not until this time that he deeply realized the gap between Tao Insight realm and half-step king. This gap was like a natural moat, which could not be made up by pure cultivation. Even if Lin Sun had set foot on the top of the Tao path and could be called invincible in Tao Insight realm, he still could not make it. Of course, this referred to a pure competition of cultivation, which could not represent everything. Lin Sure also have such a day. Shi Nanming was very excited, and his eyes were full of killing intent. Such a young man, who ranked third on the blood list and had brought many blows and shadows to the voodoo barbarian camp, was going to die in his hands today, which made Shi Nanming feel a great sense of satisfaction. He believed that if he killed Lin Sun today, he would be the most eye-catching half-step king in the entire voodoo barbarian camp. Boom! Shi Nanming became more and more violent. Thunderstorms swept across the sky, pouring down like a waterfall, so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. Go to hell! Shi Nanming roared fiercely, controlling the rolling thunder waves to cover Lin Sun. He had seen that Lin Sun could not hold on any longer. Whoosh! But at this moment, a nearly transparent blade suddenly appeared, and with a swish, the thunder all over the sky was cut in half. The scene was really incredible. The thunderstorm was like a waterfall, but at this moment, it was easily cut in half like a piece of cloth. This sudden scene caught Shi Nanming off guard, and his expression changed abruptly. Almost at the same time, an earth-shaking roar resounded like a dragon's roar, and the sound wave made Shi Nanming's soul tremble as if he was hit by a giant hammer. His mighty figure suddenly froze in the void, staggered, and almost fell down from the air. Swish! Before Shi Nanming could react, the nearly transparent blade had shot to him. It was too fast, so fast that Shi Nanming's hair stood on end, and he felt a fatal threat. It had to be said that, as a half-step king, Shi Nanming was really too powerful, and his reaction was extremely fast. At this critical moment, his figure twisted strangely, and he narrowly avoided this fatal blow. However, a wound that was around an inch deep had been torn open on his neck, and fresh blood sprayed out and gurgled out. Just a little bit more, and his throat would have been severed. This caused Shi Nanming to break out in a cold sweat. His face instantly became ashen, and he went mad with hatred. In this battle, where victory was within his grasp, he had almost been killed. "You're courting death," Shi Nanming roared angrily, which made the world tremble. But at this moment, Lin Sun had already escaped. Lin Sun sighed in his heart that he failed to kill Shi Nanming. Although the broken blade had transformed into a magic weapon, because his cultivation was too low, the limit of the power he exerted could barely hurt a half-step king. Moreover, this was in the case of a sneak attack. As for the Paleo's roar, it might be able to greatly affect the strongmen at the level of reincarnation development realm, but its power was obviously limited for a half-step king. Lin Sun had to choose to escape. Whoosh! His figure was like an ice puppet shuttling through the void, and his speed had reached the limit. But behind him, Shi Nanming's extremely angry roar still came, and the voice was getting closer and closer. Obviously, the enraged half-step king was catching up with him. This guy is on guard. Even if I use the broken blade this time, I'm afraid it will be difficult to hurt him. Unfortunately, I don't have insignificance bow. Otherwise, I won't be so embarrassed. I can kill this old beast directly with an arrow. While escaping, Lin Sun suddenly remembered that it had been nearly 8 days since he lent the insignificance bow and the blue sky arrow to bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye. But in these 8 days, he didn't hear any movement about her, which seemed a little strange. Could it be that she was waiting for a satisfying prey? Thinking of this, Lin Sun's heart suddenly trembled, and he felt an indescribable sense of palpitating danger. In an instant, his face changed. An extremely mighty figure had suddenly appeared on the path ahead. The figure was enveloped in bright, golden divine radiance, and it was like a divine sun that illuminated the heavens and the earth. A king, and it was obvious that he came from the golden barbarian branch. Lin Sun finally dared to confirm that what Shi Nanming said before was true. This time, the voodoo barbarian tribe sent a real king to deal with Lin Sun. All of a sudden, Lin Sun's situation became precarious. It was really difficult for him to advance or retreat, just like a desperate situation. "Little bastard, why don't you run away?" Shi Nanming's cold and angry shout came from behind. He also saw the majestic and dazzling figure, golden like a god, standing between heaven and earth, like a king overlooking all living beings. Chapter 746. The reason why Shi Nanming was angry was that he should be the one to kill Lin Sun, but now it was obviously impossible. Sounds of nature the dazzling, majestic king that appeared in the distance was called Jin Chaos Wei. He was an old monster that had lived for thousands of years. Among the barbarian kings in the voodoo barbarian camp, Jin Chaos Wei was also one of the best. Only a few old monsters, such as Dark Barbarian Ghost King, Thunder Barbarian King, and Thunder Barbarian King, could compete with him. Now, Jin Chaos Wei appeared. Without thinking, Shi Nanming knew that the credit of killing Lin Shire would not fall on him. "Little bastard, it's your blessing to die in the hands of Lord Jin." Shi Nanming's voice revealed a trace of unwillingness. But Lin Sun's expression at the moment seemed a little strange. When he first glimpsed Jin Chaos Wei, he was still frightened and shocked. But just for a moment, he calmed down. This seemed a little abnormal. Shi Nanming also noticed this scene and couldn't help thinking angrily that Lin Sun was unwilling to accept his fate when facing him just now. Yet now, when faced with a king, he directly admitted defeat, and it seemed as if he was resigned to his fate and was waiting to be captured. Such a comparison was too infuriating. Little bastard, do you just accept your fate like this? I'm very surprised. It said that you are bold and fearless, isn't it? Shi Nanming's unwillingness and anger turned into ridicule and vented from his mouth. It turns out that you are just a guy who bullies the weak and fears the strong. It's really disappointing. Don't be disappointed. At this time, Lin Sun's lips curved into an unfathomable smile. Believe me, you will be satisfied later. What? Shi Nanming was stunned and then flew into a rage. Lin Sun had obviously admitted defeat, but he was still not afraid of him at all. Did he have no sense of existence as a half-step king in Lin Sun's eyes? Shi Nanming felt that his dignity was hurt and his face was very embarrassed. However, when he was about to teach Lin a hard lesson, his eyes suddenly widened and almost fell out of his eye sockets. His face became dull in an instant, as if he had been struck by lightning. In the extreme distance, the body of the king of the gold barbarians, Jin Chaos Wei, that was originally standing proudly like a brilliant sun, had actually collapsed inch by inch, and his flesh and blood rustled as they fell. This scene was far too thrilling. An extremely terrifying old freak at the king realm had died without making a single sound, and he hadn't even said a single word. Shi Nanming was not a greenhorn who had never seen the world. As a half-step king, he had seen all kinds of death scenes in his life. However, when he saw the scene before him, he still felt his scalp go numb and his soul leave his body. Jin Chaos Wei. This was a terrifying ancestor of the Golden Barbarians. Rumor had it that he had begun to explore the mystery of the 9 tribulations of longevity. But now he had died without a sound. Shi Nanming almost thought that he was seeing things, and he was utterly unable to maintain his composure. His mind was in chaos, and his entire body felt cold. How could it be? How could it be? Shi Nanming looked dull and in a trance. Lin Sun, on the other hand, seemed to be much calmer. At first, he was also shocked, but soon he noticed the clues. When Jin Chaos Wei died without a sound, he was completely sure that the king of the Golden Barbarians had been killed long before he came. And it was the arrow of blue sky that killed him. Lin Sun was too familiar with the breath of the arrow of blue sky. How could he not guess that the first female general of the empire, Zhao Xingye, who had the title of Bloodthirsty Queen, was nearby? This was also the reason why Lin Sun could remain calm and composed. Now, you won't be disappointed, will you? Lin Sun turned his head and saw the dull and shocked expression on Shi Nanming's face. He couldn't help but think that this old guy must have been scared out of his wits. Shi Nanming swallowed his saliva with difficulty. His face changed dramatically, and he realized that something was wrong. As he spoke, he turned around and fled. It was too scary. A king had died just like that. As a half-step Shi Nanming, how could he dare to stay any longer? However, he was still very perplexed in his heart. How could a king like Jin Chaos Wei possibly die silently like this? In the bloodthirsty battlefield, who could kill a king so easily? Could it be that some horrible creature in the depths of the mulberry forest had come out? The more Shi Nanming thought about it, the more uneasy and scared he became. No, he suddenly remembered something. Just a few days ago, when the Ghost Spirit King and the other 3 kings led an army to attack the 7th camp of the Empire, a similar thing happened. At that time, Zhang Sanlai of the 7th camp killed Green Soul King with a pair of terrifying bows and arrows. The Ghost Spirit King and the others were so frightened that they retreated and fled before the battle began. Could it be? Shi Nanming's heart trembled. Could it be that there is another king of the empire lying in ambush nearby, holding a pair of bows and arrows that belonged to Lin Shi? Undeniably, as a half-step, Shi Nanming's experience and reaction were excellent. After a little analysis, he guessed an answer close to the truth. Unfortunately, it was too late for him to react at this time. On his way to escape, a woman appeared out of nowhere. An extremely beautiful woman. Dressed in a black crane cloak, she was tall, slender, and upright. Her black hair fell down like a waterfall, revealing a beautiful face that could bring disaster to a country and people. Her eyes were dark and bright, Her lips were red and moist, and her skin was smoother and more delicate than mutton fat jade. She was breathtakingly beautiful. However, at the first sight of this woman, Shi Nanming completely collapsed. As if he had seen a devil queen from hell, his whole face turned ashen as if he had lost his parents. Bloodthirsty queen. It was her. This was the last thought of Shi Nanming before he died, with endless despair and helplessness. At this time, Lin Sun had already caught up with Zhao Xingye. You be the bait, and I will kill the enemies. Let's try to kill more barbarians. After a little greeting, Zhao Xingye made a suggestion. Lin Sun was stunned. Can it work? Don't belittle yourself. You are much more famous than me now. Voodoo barbarians hate you so much that they send barbarians to hunt you down. Under such circumstances, you are undoubtedly the most suitable person to take on this great responsibility. Zhao Xingye smiled charmingly. Her posture was straight and graceful. She had a unique temperament that was a combination of grace, beauty, sternness, and charm. She had a myriad of amorous feelings and a majesty that no one dared to blaspheme. Lin Sun smiled bitterly. It was the first time for him to hear such an unconventional compliment. It was absolutely the first time for him to be hunted down as a skill. But in the end, Lin Sun agreed. In the following time, Lin Sun no longer hid himself, nor was he cautious. He directly rushed along the battlefield to the enemy's base camp. Along the way, many strong barbarians were alarmed and almost couldn't believe their eyes. Wasn't Lin sure afraid of death? Didn't he know that a real barbarian king was hunting him down? He was so arrogant. Those strong barbarians were all angry. They thought it was a blatant provocation. Lin Sun regarded them as nothing and was extremely arrogant. Lin Sun didn't pay attention to them. When he met some weak enemies, he directly chopped them down. As for some weaker opponents, he didn't bother to hunt them down. He let them run away so that they could inform others. What made Lin Sun feel a little pity was that he didn't meet any real barbarians along the way. Not even a half-step king. It's nothing more than a fox assuming the tiger's might, isn't it? Thinking of his behavior at this time, Lin Sun couldn't help but look a little strange. But how to put it, it was really cool. At this moment, Lin Sun wished he could be in the Forbidden City. In this case, he could directly kill the Zhou family and the Qin family. With Zhao Xingye, the bloodthirsty queen, following him, wouldn't he be able to kill anyone who stood in his way? Of course, this was an illusion after all. It was unrealistic. Lin Sun soon laughed and shook his head to stop thinking about it. Report. Lin Shi is coming to our camp alone. He is too arrogant. This guy doesn't take us seriously at all. If we don't eradicate him, how can we, the barbarians, save our face? In the camp of voodoo barbarians, the news was quickly sent back, which caused a great sensation and made the faces of those strong voodoo barbarians turn green with anger. Was going too far. That was it. A young man in the Tao Insight realm dared to act so arrogantly in their territory alone. This was too arrogant. Good. I was worried that I didn't have a chance to kill him. I didn't expect that he would take the initiative to seek death. Let's go and kill him. Soon, strong voodoo barbarians left the camp angrily, ready to kill Lin Sun with a strong, murderous intent. However, they didn't lose their heads because of anger. Almost all the barbarians were above the spirit awakening realm, and many of them were in the half-step king realm. The younger generation will surpass us in time. I like to see what this guy is capable of. How dare he come here alone to provoke us? Be careful. It doesn't matter. This is the territory of our barbarians. Even if there is a trick, we can't tolerate a young guy coming here. In the end, even a barbarian king couldn't sit still. He left the camp with a stern face. At the same time, in an area thousands of miles away from the barbarian camp, Lin Sun was standing on the top of a mountain, overlooking some barbarians coming from afar. With his hands behind his back and a calm look, he said leisurely, "I've killed so many barbarians like you these days. I'm tired of you. Go. Call your masters to come here to die. I don't want to waste any more energy on you." His words were light, but every word resounded clearly between heaven and earth. The undisguised sarcasm and contempt in his words made those strong voodoo barbarians stamping with rage and their lungs almost explode. Search for CM or enter the website's sad face. Chapter 747. Lin Sun's words were full of sarcasm and contempt, but his words were casual and his expression was calm, which was too abominable in the eyes of the voodoo barbarians. Heavenly voice 2, Inhuman Puppy. You're *king tired of living, huh? Why don't you get down here and die? A bad-tempered fire barbarian shouted. Other voodoo barbarians also looked gloomy, with killing intent in their eyes. Lin Shire, this human teenager who had risen like a comet, had brought too many shadows and blows to the barbarian camp these days. Originally, this was already a great shame. Who would have thought that before they could take revenge, this young man took the initiative to come here? Moreover, he was so arrogant that he didn't put them in his eyes at all, which was too hateful. What are you shouting for? Get up here and die if you have the guts, and keep quiet if you don't. Lin Sun stood on the top of the lonely mountain, overlooking more and more voodoo barbarians gathering in the distance, still with an irreverent and disdainful look. You are courting death. The fire barbarian flew into a rage. If he didn't do anything when someone came to provoke him, it would be really humiliating. Boom! He stamped on the ground and suddenly rose into the air. He swung his arm and threw a white bone flywheel surrounded by flames toward the mountain where Lin Sun was standing. Other voodoo barbarians narrowed their eyes and watched closely. Although they were provoked, they still kept calm and vaguely felt that there was something wrong with what happened today. Although a young man in Tao Insight Realm had made a great name for himself in the past, he dared to come to their territory alone to provoke them. What was the difference between this and walking into a trap? Was this young man an idiot? Obviously not. Then there was something wrong with his way of doing things. You're courting death. On the mountain, Lin Sun sneered. He didn't move, but a bright and transparent blade suddenly swept out, like a flying spirit saber, holy and dreamy. Crack! The white bone flywheel was cut in half in an instant and burst into a rain of light. Whoosh! At the same time, the bright blade flashed gently in the void. With a puff, the throat of the fire barbarian, who rose into the air, was cut in an instant. It was too fast. In the blink of an eye, he had cut down a spirit awakener, as if he were cutting vegetables and melons. Those voodoo barbarians who had been paying close attention were shocked in their hearts, and their pupils dilated. Voila! Scarlet blood spurted out from the dead fire barbarian's throat like a violent waterfall, poignant and horrifying. Previously, those barbarians were still angry, thinking that it was a shame to be provoked by Lin Sun alone. But now, their hearts went cold, shocked by this scene. They had long known that the reason why Lin Sun could kill half-step kings consecutively before was because of a pair of terrifying bows and arrows of mysterious origin. In other words, if it weren't for this pair of bows and arrows, they would not be afraid of Lin Sun at all. However, the scene that unfolded before their eyes overturned their thoughts and caught them off guard. Without the help of that pair of bows and arrows, Lin Shire was still able to kill a spirit awakener on their side with one blow. That would be too shocking. The scene was silent for a while. Fortunately, most of the voodoo barbarians present were above the spirit awakening realm, and many of them were half-step kings. If it was any other expert, they would have probably been terrified by this strike to the point there where the fight collapsed, and they would have fled in panic. Even so, the faces of these voodoo barbarians present were still gloomy and ugly. Each of them could be regarded as a leading figure in the voodoo barbarian camp and belonged to the mainstay. Although they couldn't compare with the old monsters in the king realm, they could be called big shots. But now, with so many big shots together, instead of frightening the opponent, one of their companions was easily killed by the opponent under their eyes. How could they not be angry? Look, I told you that you couldn't do it, but you jumped out to die. Who can you blame? On the top of the mountain, Lin Sun sighed lightly. With his hands behind his back, his figure was tall and handsome. His clothes fluttered in the wind, giving him a kind of ethereal air. But his posture made those voodoo barbarians feel more disgusting and arrogant. Little guy, this is the territory of voodoo barbarian camp. I'm really curious. Who gave you the courage to come here alone to offend us? A half-step king stepped out with a cold look. He was from the wood barbarian, named Ching He. This was what all the voodoo barbarians felt wrong. If it weren't so, how could they stay still like now? They would have rushed out to besiege Lin Sun. Lin Sun squinted at Ching He and said, "Old guy, you'd better back off. You are not qualified to talk to me." Arrogant. As soon as Lin Sun said this, Ching He and other half-step kings were so angry that their eyelids twitched and their killing intent showed. They couldn't wait to slap the little bastard standing on the top of the mountain and talking nonsense. Other voodoo barbarians were also furious. Even half-step kings were not qualified. This guy was really arrogant. At this time, Ching He was so angry that he laughed. "I don't care what you are thinking. Since you are here today, stay here for me." Boom. He stepped out with eyes as sharp as a blade. His skinny figure was full of a horrible breath. The invisible killing intent covered the world like a tide. At the same time, another 3 half-step kings also stood out and approached Lin Sun from different directions with unfriendly looks. They seemed to be very cautious and careful. They believed that Lin Sun didn't come here to die on purpose. He must have other plans. Therefore, even though they were dealing with Lin Sun, a young man in Tao Insight realm, they not only seemed to be very cautious, but also sent out 4 half-step kings at one time. If this news spread out, it would definitely shock everyone. Who had ever seen such a thing in the past to use such a lineup to deal with a young man in Tao Insight realm? On the mountain peak, Lin Sun watched quietly with a strange color in his eyes. He was a little dissatisfied in his heart. Why didn't the king of voodoo barbarians show up at this time? When Lin Sun just thought of this, he heard a boom, and there was a great turbulence between heaven and earth. It was like the surging of wind and thunder, more like the roar of gods and demons. The horrible power made all the voodoo barbarians change their expressions. Sure enough, there was a conspiracy. Ching He and the other 3 half-step kings who attacked together stopped almost at the same time. They sneered in their hearts. They guessed right. Lin Sun dared to come here alone because he had other plans. However, soon their expressions changed, and they were so shocked that their souls almost flew out. In their sight, a black light, like a peerlessly sharp blade, suddenly burst out at an incredible speed. The void was torn into pieces and turned into turbulence, with sharp and harsh whines. The world fell into a great turbulence like a collapse. It was like a box that was severely penetrated, crushed, and about to collapse and burst into pieces by the black light. It was terrible. In a trance, they could even see a magnificent figure in the distance, stepping on the sun, the moon, and the stars, and bending the bow to move the universe. There was no doubt that the black light was a divine arrow that was shot out. But because its fierce power was so terrible, it caused many strange phenomena full of destructive breath to appear. Damn it! Ching He and other half-step kings, as well as the voodoo barbarians present, were completely shocked at this moment. They were like falling into an ice cave. Under such monstrous power, they couldn't have any thoughts of resistance or evasion, and they couldn't stop it at all. What kind of arrow was this? It seemed to be able to amaze time and time, penetrate the barrier of time and space, and make all the stars in the sky dim and fall into oblivion. However, what made all of them confused was that this black divine arrow was not aimed at them, but flashed in the void and swept in the direction behind them. The terrible speed and power, just the sound made by cutting through the void, made those voodoo barbarians feel dizzy. Their souls were about to split, and their blood was surging. But they didn't care about this. Almost at the same time, they all turned their heads. Who on earth was such a stunning arrow aimed at? Boom! In the blink of an eye, when these voodoo barbarians just thought of this, they saw a terrible explosion in the distance behind them. It was like hundreds of thousands of volcanoes erupting there, spewing out billowing mushroom-shaped, blazing airflow, rushing to the sky, evaporating the clouds, and the void seemed to be burned into a black hole. And in this shocking explosion, there was a figure roaring in it, and the sound resounded through the world. It was a kind of mournful scream before death, revealing endless anger, panic, unwillingness, and even an indescribable frustration. It seemed that he didn't expect that he would be shot to death like this. The world was shaking, the airflow was disordered, and the sand and stones were flying. Even though they were far away, those voodoo barbarians in the field were still shocked and stunned. Their legs were trembling, and they were about to collapse completely. Flame King. There was no need to guess at all. These voodoo barbarians recognized that the dead figure was Flame King, the old monster of the fire barbarian branch. When he was in the mulberry forest, Flame King was seriously injured, but after all, he survived. After a period of rest, his injury had mostly healed. But he never thought that he could escape from the massacre in the mulberry forest, but failed to escape this terrible arrow and was obliterated on the spot. Anyway, he was a king after all. How would he die like this? The whole field was silent, and everyone was shocked there. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but be shocked. He had seen many scenes of kings dying since he started his cultivation, but every time he saw it, he still couldn't calm down. After all, the terrifying existence of kings, whether in the empire or in the voodoo barbarian tribe, was like a pillar of the sea. They were few in number, and killing one would mean one less king. But Lin Sun calculated that, leaving aside King Jinpa, who died in the mulberry forest, 3 kings of the voodoo barbarian tribe had died in this period of time. Green Soul King was killed by Zhang Sunlai. Jin Chaos Wei and Flame King in front of him were killed by Zhao Xingye. The death of 3 kings at once was definitely an unexpected heavy blow to the voodoo barbarian camp. Perhaps only in this way can the dangerous situation facing the Empire camp be resolved. At this moment, Lin Sun completely understood why Zhao Xingye borrowed the insignificant spiritual bow and sky arrow. Chapter 748. Amidst the deathly silent atmosphere, Zhao Xingye's graceful and straight figure appeared. Her beautiful eyes were as deep as the sea. As she glanced around, an indescribable pressure spread out. Bloodthirsty queen. When they recognized Zhao Xingye's identity, Qing He and other barbarians' hearts sank to the bottom, and their faces turned pale. They finally understood why Lin Sun was so fearless, and why the arrow, just now, had such amazing and terrifying power. Everything was because of this woman, a dangerous woman who had been feared by the barbarians for thousands of years. They were convinced that, even in a head-on confrontation, King Yin Xiong was no match for this woman. Go back and tell King Guzhan that in the next period of time, if any king dares to make trouble in the camp of the Empire, don't blame me for giving him a tooth for a tooth. To everyone's surprise, Zhao Xingye did not continue to kill. After saying this, she turned around and left with Lin Sun. She killed the barbarian with 1 arrow, and then left after saying this. Qing He and the others watched Zhao Xingye and Lin Sun leave, but none of them dared to stop them. They didn't even dare to speak. The atmosphere was deathly silent. On the same day, in the camp of voodoo barbarians, in one of the tents, a stooped old man dressed in animal skin with sparse hair and an extremely old appearance was similarly silent when he heard Zhao Xingye's warning. After a long time, he sighed softly and said in a hoarse and low voice, "What a pair of fierce bows and arrows." Zhao Xingye. In the tent, there were also top barbarians of the voodoo barbarian tribe. The weakest barbarian had the cultivation of half-step king, and there were many old monsters in the king realm. However, they all looked very gloomy at this time, especially when they heard the sigh of the skinny old man. Their faces became gloomier and gloomier. In one day, Jin Chaos Wei, the king of the gold barbarian tribe, and King Yin Xiong, the king of the fire barbarian tribe, were killed by the same woman. Such a heavy blow had never happened before. I originally thought that before the calamity of the Grand Tao descended, it would be sufficient for us to seize this opportunity to annihilate the camp of the empires in one go and complete something that hasn't been accomplished for a few thousands of years. Who would have imagined that such a variable would actually appear? The old man's expression was neither sad nor happy, and his eyes were filled with the vicissitudes of life. He said in a light voice, "It's really quite a pity." One of the kings frowned and said angrily, "If it weren't for the sudden appearance of Lin Shi, and the bow in his hand. How could this have happened? When the big shots heard the name, Lin Shi, they all frowned, and a murderous intent rose in their hearts. He was only a young man, yet he'd stirred up a storm after making an appearance in the bloodthirsty battlefield, causing them to be badly battered and suffering setbacks repeatedly. This seemed to be too inconceivable and infuriating. What's the point of complaining now? The old man, sitting at the head of the table, seemed to have come to terms with it. He appeared abnormally calm. Ever since the great opportunity appeared in the mulberry forest, our clan has already lost 4 kings. We can't go on like this. Do you really want to compromise with Zhao Xingye? All the big shots were shocked. This woman has always been bloodthirsty, and now she has a peerless treasure in her hand. If we continue to fight against her, even if we try our best, we will only end up with a lose-lose result. The old man stood up shakily and walked out of the tent with his back hunched. Give the order that from today on, we shall cease all activities and make a truce with the enemy. As he spoke, he had already left. However, even though he'd already left, the light words he left behind were like 1,000 kilograms that pressed down on the hearts of every single great figure in the tent, causing them to have no choice but to accept it even though they were extremely depressed and furious in their hearts. Because this old man was King Guzhan, an old monster at the dominating level of the voodoo barbarian camp. His words were like a decree, and no one dared to disobey. On this day, bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye launched a powerful attack and killed 2 voodoo barbarian kings, forcing King Guzhan to agree to a truce. When the news spread to the 8 camps of the empire, it immediately caused a great sensation, which made every practitioner of the empire extremely excited and joyful. During this period, the voodoo barbarian army frequently attacked the camp of the empire, making the situation tense and depressing. It could be said that everyone was in danger. Everyone had to worry that if a full-scale war broke out, the remaining materials could not support the camp of the empire to the end. But now, all this was no longer a problem. How could it not be exciting and joyful? The gloomy and depressing atmosphere in the camp of the empire in recent days was also swept away, and the camp became lively again. General Zhao is so amazing. She killed 2 voodoo barbarian kings alone and forced King Guzhan to lower his head. Such divine power is enough to shine as bright as the sun and the moon. Many practitioners of the empire were cheering for Zhao Xingye, and their admiration for her even reached the point of fanaticism. As far as I know, General Zhao could win this time thanks to the help of the 12th young Master Lin. Is there such a thing? I'm not afraid to tell you that when General Zhao killed the 2 voodoo barbarian kings, she relied on the pair of bows and arrows in Child Lin's hands. Yes, according to the intelligence from the scouts in the front line, King Guzhan seemed to be extremely afraid of this pair of bows and arrows, so he had to make the decision to stop the war. I see. In this case, Child Lin also has a share of this credit. Similarly, the news that Lin Sun generously lent bows and arrows also spread like wildfire and became a good story for a while. Practitioners of the empire all praised Lin Sun for serving the public wholeheartedly and being righteous. He was absolutely a model of their generation and the model of the empire. When Qin Chu heard the news, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. At that time, he also wanted to borrow Lin Sun's bow and arrows, but Lin Sun refused without hesitation at that time. How the hell was this wholeheartedly for the public? How could he be righteous and the model of the empire? Could he afford it? The more Qin Chu thought about it, the more depressed he became, especially when he thought that he failed to borrow Lin Sun's bow and was set up by Zhao Xingye. He became more and more grieved. However, no matter how angry he was, Lin Sun's name was absolutely like the sun at noon in the imperial camp today, and he was highly respected and praised by countless practitioners. On the contrary, Qin Chu was scolded behind his back and had a bad reputation because someone leaked the news that he had borrowed Lin Sun's bow by force. This made Qin Chu so angry that he wanted to kill all those who criticized and satirized him behind his back. On the night of the return to Camp 7, Chapter 749. After my perception and exploration these days, The origin of this insignificant spiritual bow should be extremely complicated. Although I can't know who made it, I can be sure that this bow has killed a real sage. Zhao Xingye soon gave an answer. Heavenly voice, aye, however, this answer shocked Lin Sun. He had killed a real sage. This was simply too shocking. In Lin Sun's impression, the sage was almost invincible. He could pick the stars and the moon, travel around the world, live as long as the ancient times, and shine as bright as the sun and the moon. But now it was said that the insignificant spiritual bow had killed the sage. How shocking was that? Even Zhao Xingye, who had already confirmed this, had a slightly strange expression on his face at this moment. This result was indeed too shocking. Even she could not imagine how this bow could have such a bloody and dazzling past. Killing a sage, just this point alone, was enough to shock the world. What made Zhao Xingye feel most incredible was that this bow had killed more than one sage. This bow has been stained with the blood of sages and obliterated the souls of sages. In ancient times, it could be regarded as a peerless, murderous weapon. But now it has been seriously damaged. There is too much fierceness and blood in it. Sooner or later, it will burst out completely. Zhao Xingye looked dignified and looked at Lin Sun. Once this happens with your current strength, you are destined to suffer from the backlash, and the consequences are destined to be unbearable. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. He had never expected that there was such a hidden danger in the insignificant spiritual bow before. Backlash. He couldn't help but ask, how terrible is it? Zhao Xingye glanced at Lin Sun with a pair of beautiful eyes and said casually, when I killed Jin Chaos Wei, the king of golden barbarians, a strand of dormant fierceness in this bow accidentally overflowed. It was just a strand, but it impacted my soul and almost took away my will. When I killed King Yin of fire barbarians, a remnant resentment of a sage rushed out of the bow, which almost made my chi collapse. When Zhao Xingye spoke up to this point, a rare trace of fear and terror appeared on his face. At that time, if I didn't possess a secret treasure that guarded the soul, my soul would definitely have been destroyed by the bow when I killed Flame Sky King and died on the spot. Although his words were plain, Lin Sun was stiff all over and gasped. Zhao Xingye was absolutely a top-rate existence in the king realm. Yet even she had suffered the backlash of the insignificant spirit bow twice in succession. Moreover, each time was more dangerous than the last, and it was even to the extent that she'd almost lost her life. From this, one could imagine how terrifying the fierce aura contained within the insignificant spiritual bow was. However, you don't have to be too worried. The stronger your cultivation is, the greater the backlash you will suffer when using this bow. Since you haven't encountered the problem of backlash until now, it proves that the insignificant spiritual bow can't hurt you at the moment. Zhao Xingye seemed to have guessed Lin's concern and said, however, the higher your cultivation is in the future, the more you need to pay attention to this problem. After all, it is a potential threat after all. Unless, Lin Sun asked, unless what? Unless you can find the lost weapon spirit of this bow. Weapon spirit? That's right. For such a peerless treasure, from the moment it was born, it would definitely awaken its own spirit. This is just like a human body possessing a soul. Zhao Xingye's beautiful eyes were shining with a luster of wisdom. Such a treasure is also called a psychic holy treasure, because only a saint who has mastered the law of Holy Way can forge such a treasure. Weapon spirit, psychic holy treasure, Lin Sun murmured thoughtfully. I suggest that if you go to the ancient wilderness to cultivate in the future, you should go to the mysterious holy hidden land Sunset Valley if you have a chance. Zhao Xingye suddenly gave a suggestion. Lin Sun was very unfamiliar with the term holy hidden land, so he didn't feel anything. But when he heard the words Sunset Valley, he was stunned at once. He remembered that when he was in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea, when he was promoted to the middle level of Tao Insight, he triggered the vision of flowers blooming on the other shore. That magnificent vision could be said to be the greatest beauty in the world. But the old toad was disdainful towards this. It once said that there was a holy land in the ancient times called Sunset Valley, and there was a sun crow that had transformed into a sun that resided there all year long, while emitting dazzling divine lights that were sufficient to illuminate the heavens. That sort of scene could be called a wonder of the heavens and the earth, a divine beauty of creation. At that time, Lin Sun still had doubts and thought that the old toad was bragging again. But now when he heard the name Sunset Valley from Zhao Xingye again, Lin Sun realized that the so-called holy place in ancient times actually existed. Do you still remember the vision when you used this bow? The sun fell from the sky, and the golden crow cried blood in the blue sea. I'm sure that this bow has killed the sages of the golden crow. Zhao Xingye analyzed. If you want to know where the spirit of this bow is, Sunset Valley is undoubtedly the most worthwhile place to go. It used to be the nest of the golden crow in ancient times. Even now, there are still many unsolved mysteries in it. Lin Sun nodded seriously and remembered firmly. If you can find the spirit, you can not only suppress the inherent fierceness of this bow, but also restore some of its former power. Zhao Xingye's slender white fingers stroked the insignificant spiritual bow. The body of the bow was made of white skulls. It was unusually ferocious, but did not make people's hearts palpitate. Instead, it gave people a sense of holiness. Zhao Xingye couldn't help but sigh. Look at these white skulls. I suspect that this bow is made of the skulls of the sages. This speculation scared Lin Sun. The skulls of the sages. There were 18 white skulls on this bow. If Zhao Xingye's speculation was true, didn't it mean that the skulls of 18 sages were used to build this bow? This was too shocking. Next, Zhao Xingye carefully returned the insignificant spiritual bow to Lin Sun, and then took out the sky arrow and said, "As for this arrow, I recognize it. It's one of the 9 arrows of the ancient Dei tribe. These 9 arrows are named Sky Arrow, Netherworld Arrow, Shangxie Arrow, Moly Arrow, Crooked Tooth, Lucky Light, Pinyu Arrow, Soulful Arrow, and Indestructible. Every single arrow has its own profundity and possesses an unimaginably terrifying divine might. As is known to the world, the clansmen of the ancient Dei tribe were all excellent archers. They had an extremely glorious past and were famous in ancient times. Since these 9 arrows could become the most precious treasures of the tribe, their origin is naturally not simple. It's a pity that Sky Arrow and Netherworld Arrow are a pair of complementary twin arrows. They can be used together with the soul-drawing bow to exert the greatest power. When he heard this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. Originally, he thought that since there was a certain echo and connection between the insignificant spiritual bow and the Sky Arrow, they must complement each other. But he never thought that the truth was like this. I see. Lin Sun realized that he had thought too much before. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? When he entered the bloodthirsty battlefield with the insignificant spiritual bow, he suddenly found an arrow that complemented it. Obviously, it was not so simple. However, the insignificant spiritual bow should be stronger than the soul-drawing bow. Otherwise, even if the Sky Arrow has been seriously damaged, it would not be so easy to subdue it. Zhao Xingye was worthy of being an outstanding king-level existence. With only a few words, she deduced many things that Lin Sun didn't know. Lin Sun couldn't help but be convinced. Remember, when you enter the ancient wilderness in the future, don't use the insignificant spiritual bow unless it is a critical moment. There are too many masters there. Once the magic of the bow is discovered, it is bound to bring you endless trouble. Late at night, when Lin Sun was about to leave, Zhao Xingye reminded him again, which made Lin Sun awestruck. As the saying went, a man's wealth arouses suspicion. Lin Sun naturally understood this truth. As the voodoo barbarian camp quieted down and carried out the truce, the Empire camp was much more relaxed in the following days. In the number 7 camp, no matter who it was, no one was willing to go out rashly if there was no urgent matter. Since the truce had been set and the supplies were tight, there was not much left. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible to take the initiative to make trouble. This rare, quiet, and peaceful atmosphere made Lin Sun slightly uncomfortable. However, he was not idle. In addition to practicing martial arts diligently every day, he went to the ordnance office to help some practitioners refine or repair weapons. Occasionally, when he was free, he would find Lu Wenting, Bai, Yin Feng, and other friends to drink and party. But every time, Lin Sun couldn't help thinking of Huang and Hu Tong, who had passed away, and inevitably felt a little depressed. The days were very dull. Sometimes, Lin Sun was so bored that he left the camp alone and wandered in the bloodthirsty battlefield. This world was always gloomy, dangerous, and desolate. Even though there were no more enemies on the battlefield, there were still many natural disasters and dangers lurking in it. However, Lin Sun had already been familiar with everything here, so he was not as nervous and scared as he was when he came here for the first time. Several times when he passed by the mulberry forest, Lin Sun couldn't help but stop and look at it from a distance. He would think of the magnificent sacred tree of ice and snow and the golden cicada with a vision of wishing all creatures in the world could become saints. He would also think of the blood-colored moth with a clear and gentle voice and an awe-inspiring aura, as well as the white cicada with a clear chirp that shook the 9 heavens. Right, there was also the huge cyan flood dragon that Sung Jinghong caught a glimpse of, which was also a horrible creature that had set foot on the holy path. There was also the mysterious palace that appeared in the world. It stood between heaven and earth, and there were 9,999 steps, just like a ladder to heaven. It once emitted a holy light that illuminated the sky and dyed the world with a layer of magnificent sacred aura. The vision was boundless. What exactly was hidden in such a mysterious and unknown Taoist palace? Why did it attract so many creatures of the holy path? And why did it not hesitate to burst into fierce, bloody conflicts? Lin Sun didn't know that the mulberry forest was completely different from before. It was completely covered by a thick, bloody mist, and he couldn't see his fingers in front of him. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun didn't dare to cross the line at all. But Lin Sun was sure that perhaps when the disaster of the Great Path came, those horrible creatures lurking in the mulberry forest would not be willing to be lonely and would come out of nowhere. Time flew like an arrow, and time flew like a shuttle. Unknowingly, the time to open the passage to the Empire had come quietly. Chapter 750. Buzz. In the center of Camp 7, an ancient transmission formation, which had been silent for a long time, was activated, releasing a wave of obscure waves. Lin Sun carried his luggage on his back and stood in front of it, waiting quietly with a group of Imperial practitioners. It was time to leave. Thinking of everything he had experienced since he entered the bloodthirsty battlefield, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing with emotion. He would definitely come back to have a look in the future. Child Lin, take care. In the distance, many Imperial soldiers were seeing Lin Sun off reluctantly. Grandmaster Lin, you must come back to see us if you have a chance in the future. A group of spiritual tattooists from the Ordnance Department also came to see Lin Sun off under the leadership of Master Ing. Haha, don't worry about the lack of friends on the road ahead. Everyone in the world knows you. Bro, when I get tired of the life on the battlefield, I'll come back to have a drink with you. Lu Wenting laughed, drank a pot of liquor, and then handed it to Lin Sun. Brother Lin, you are destined to have a place on the road of struggle for the Tao in the future. I only hope that we will have a chance to meet again. Yin Feng, who was usually silent, also spoke at this moment and looked at Lin Sun seriously. Lin Sun's eyes swept across the faces of these people one by one, and his heart was warm. These people had gone through thick and thin with him and fought side by side. However, when Lin Sun finally looked at Zhang Sun Lai in the distance, Zhang Sun Lai waved his hand impatiently as if driving away a fly, and shouted, "Get out of here. Don't trouble me again. Since you appeared, my head has become bigger than before." Everyone burst into laughter. Lin Sun was a little embarrassed, and then he couldn't help laughing. The transmission formation had been activated, and they couldn't waste any more time. The supplies from the Empire and the newly dispatched soldiers all needed to be transmitted through this passage. Farewell, everyone. Lin Sun cupped his hands to the surroundings, and then stepped into the transmission formation with a group of practitioners who were about to return to the Empire like him. Farewell. The people in the distance cupped their hands in unison. After all, they had to say goodbye. They didn't know when they would meet again, and maybe there would be no chance to meet again in the future. This caused many practitioners to feel suffocated and flustered. It was precisely because he had seen so many deaths and parting in the bloodthirsty battlefield that he understood the meaning of parting. Even the corners of Zhang Sun Lai's lips wriggled. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, he just waved his hand fiercely without making a sound. What about a bye? When the transmission formation was running, Lin Sun still couldn't see Abi's figure in the end. He couldn't help but be a little stunned. That's true. According to her personality, she definitely wouldn't be willing to send you off. At the same time, in a stone house in the camp, Abi sat alone with her fingers intertwined together, and her chest rose and fell, seeming to be restless. Outside the window, waves of farewells resounded endlessly from afar. This caused Abi to feel even more flustered in her heart, and she struggled very much. Should she go and see him one last time? Abi bit her lips before fiercely stomping her feet and rushing out of the room like a gust of wind. However, when she rushed out of the room, the teleportation formation was already empty. That figure was nowhere to be seen. Had he already left? Abi shook all over, and a deep sense of loss welled up in her heart. Toy boy, in the future, remember not to be so nice to women anymore. They are easily moved and will remember your kindness. It's too difficult to forget you after a long time, Abi murmured to herself, and a line of tears rolled down her face silently. On this day, the passage to the Empire was opened in the bloodthirsty battlefield. In the 8 camps of the Empire, scenes of farewell were going on. Similarly, there were also new faces and new Imperial soldiers being sent to the bloodthirsty battlefield. The new generation replaced the old. They were stationed on the front line of the Empire all year round. As long as the enemy was not dead, the conquest would not stop. Rookies, do you see? This is the military merit list. Those who can be listed on it are all famous figures in our camp. This list represents supreme glory, but all of you should understand that behind every glory is an endless amount of blood and tears. A veteran was watching the military merit list in the camp with a group of new Imperial practitioners. Who is Lin Shi? How could he rank 3rd on the military merit list with the cultivation of Tao Insight Realm? This can't be true, can it? An exclamation rang out, attracting the attention of all the newcomers. Then, there was an uproar, and some people found it hard to believe. Almost all the top 100 practitioners on the military merit list were top figures of the reincarnation developing realm. And of the top 10 practitioners on the military merit list, 9 of them were senior figures of the half-step to king realm. Only the name Lin Shi was unusual and too eye-catching, because he was the only one with the cultivation of Tao Insight Realm to rank 3rd on the military merit list in the top 10. Looking at the shocked expressions on the faces of the rookies, the veteran sneered. These new recruits were really ignorant. Immediately, he coughed and said slowly, "Remember, don't judge Mr. Lin Shi by your standards. He is completely different from the Tao Insight Realm, you know. If you want to talk about his legendary experience, you won't be able to finish it in a day and night. I can only tell you," the veteran's voice was low, with a sense of awe and fanaticism from the bottom of his heart, and even more so, a sense of pride. The new recruits were skeptical at first, but at the end, they were completely attracted. Their hearts were racing, and the dazzling image of a young talent emerged in their minds at the same time. After a long time, the veteran changed the topic. "Well, let's stop here. You will have plenty of time to learn about Mr. Lin Shi's past in the future. Let's go. I'll take you to the ordnance department. Oh, right. I forgot to tell you that Mr. Lin Shi is also a spiritual tattoo guru. Don't you find it incredible? Ha ha. How can you be so king dumbfounded? You really haven't seen the world." As he led the new recruits forward, the veteran laughed. Of course, he did not mean any harm, because when he first learned about this, he looked even worse than these new recruits. There are talents in every generation, and each of them will lead the way for hundreds of years. Lin Shi, I will definitely break your record and replace your position on the military merit list. Among the new recruits, only a skinny young man looked back at the military merit list that was getting further and further away. There was an unprecedented firmness in his eyes. The young man's name was Yi Fan, a very good name. In the legendary stories told by many storytellers in the Empire, the protagonist of many stories was called Yi Fan. On this day, the voodoo barbarian camp, like the camp of the Empire, had many new recruits. My lord, who is this Lin Shi? Why is he ranked 3rd on the blood list? He is just a young man at the Tao Insight realm. Don't you overestimate him? Ridiculous. Who is this Lin Shi? How can he be valued and vigilant by our voodoo barbarian tribe? When seeing the name on the blood list, the new recruits suddenly burst into an uproar, expressing their indignation and disdain. A strong voodoo barbarian leading the new recruits suddenly looked gloomy and uncertain. After a while, he gnashed his teeth and roared, "Shut up, all of you!" The new recruits were as silent as cicadas in winter. With a livid face, the strong voodoo barbarian pointed to the name of Lin Shi on the blood list and said word by word, "You must all remember this name. He has brought endless shame to our voodoo barbarian tribe. He is an enemy that our tribe must eradicate." The strong voodoo barbarian suddenly realized that this young man named Lin Shi must not be simple. The strong voodoo barbarian didn't explain what Lin Sun had done in the end, because it was too shameful and incredible, which would seriously affect the morale of these new recruits. In the future, you will understand the meaning of this name. Finally, the strong voodoo barbarian sighed and turned away. It was said that Lin Shi, the demon-like young man, would leave today, but the bad influence he brought to the voodoo barbarian camp was doomed to be erased for a while. In fact, it was true. Although Lin Sun only fought in the bloodthirsty battlefield for half a year, he rose like a comet and became a brilliant star in the bloodthirsty battlefield. Everything that happened to him was like a miracle full of legendary colors. It was not easy to erase the influence that he had left behind. However, all this had nothing to do with Lin Sun today. Giant Crescent City of the Empire. As one of the affiliated cities that guarded the Forbidden City, the most elite army of the Empire was stationed in the Giant Crescent City all year round, under the direct jurisdiction and command of the Imperial Army. In the southwest area of the Giant Crescent City, there was a military camp covering an area of thousands of acres. On this day, with a violent roar, a transmission channel to the bloodthirsty battlefield was activated. Near the transmission formation, a group of Imperial generals stood solemnly. Each of them was as majestic as the sea, which added a sense of palpitating solemnity to the originally silent atmosphere. Buzz! The transmission channel was completely opened. With an obscure roar, the figures of Imperial practitioners came out of the channel one after another. All of a sudden, there was an uproar on the scene. The Imperial generals also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The safe opening of the channel and the safe return of Imperial soldiers from the battlefield undoubtedly showed that the situation in the bloodthirsty battlefield was not bad. Lin Sun was also among them. When he walked out of the transmission formation, he looked at the blue sky above his head, the white clouds, and breathed in the thin spiritual energy in the air. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel as if he had been separated from the world for a lifetime. In the bloodthirsty battlefield, the spiritual chi was exhausted, and it was barren and lifeless. It was full of darkness, killing, and danger. Now that he returned to the Empire and this familiar world, no one could not help but sigh with emotion. "I'm back." Lin Sun let out a long breath of turbid air, and a strong impulse surged in his heart. He wanted to go home, back to heart-cleansing Peak. Although he had left for half a year, it seemed that he had experienced a long period of time. How were his relatives and friends on heart-cleansing Peak during this half a year? In the distance, a familiar figure strode over. Before he arrived, he had laughed boldly. "Welcome back." "Hey." Chapter 751. It was Zhao Tailai. He stepped forward with a smile and gave Lin Sun a warm hug. Then he said with a smile, "I've heard that you did a great job in the bloodthirsty battlefield." The old man of the sleeping stars and moon house said that the money for the meal is almost paid. Lin Sun rolled his eyes. "I thought you were here to welcome me. I didn't expect that all you cared about was the money." Zhao Tailai laughed, put his arm around Lin Sun's shoulder, and walked away. "Let's get out of this damn place first. Otherwise, you won't be able to leave later." Lin Sun was surprised why. Zhao Tailai said casually, "You made so much noise in the bloodthirsty battlefield that some old guys in the military headquarters have their eyes on you. They want to keep you in the military headquarters." Lin Sun immediately quickened his pace. He had just come back from the battlefield and hadn't even returned home. How could he have the mood to stay in the military headquarters? Damn it, where's Lin the 12th? Where's Lin the 12th? Not long after Lin Sun and Zhao Tailai left, a rough roar rumbled through the camp. "Old Ding, what the hell are you shouting about? Even if we find Lin the 12th, he can't go with you. A good seedling like him can only stand out in our Black Dragon Army." Bullsh *T. Black Dragon Army is nothing. Our Blood Wolf Army is the elite of the elites. Even if Lin the 12th wants to go, he must go to our Blood Wolf Army. Okay, stop arguing. Our Rose Army hasn't said anything. What are you arguing about? What's the point? An intense argument broke out in the entire camp. The originally solemn and dignified generals of the Empire were now in a heated argument, their faces red with anger. All the soldiers of the Empire were stunned. Today was the day to welcome the triumphant return of the soldiers from the bloodthirsty battlefield, and there was supposed to be a celebration party later. But now, the old generals in the camp were arguing over Lin the 12th? Was there something different about this guy? Soon, someone told them about Lin Sun's brilliant achievements in the bloodthirsty battlefield, which immediately made the audience feel enlightened and stirred up. No wonder those old generals were so desperate to keep Lin Shi here. It turned out that he was a tough guy. If Lin Sun had seen this scene, he would have secretly rejoiced that he had left with Zhao Tailai in advance. Otherwise, according to this situation, if he did not agree to stay under the command of an old general today, he would never be able to leave. Oh, by the way, who is Lin Shi? Why haven't I heard of him before he went to the bloodthirsty battlefield? Suddenly, an old general with a white beard asked. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. After a while, a middle-aged general with an extremely vigorous aura said, "Half a year ago, it was Zhao Tailai who sent him to the bloodthirsty battlefield. If I'm right, he is Lin Sun." Lin? Could it be? Yes, Lin Sun, the head of Heart-Cleansing Peak. It's him. All the soldiers were shocked. Half a year ago, Lin Sun's name had already resounded over the sky of the Forbidden City and was known by the world. Yet now, he'd actually created so many dazzling and striking accomplishments in the bloodthirsty battlefield, and this seemed to be too shocking. Child Lin is peerless in the world and crowns all over the capital. Hey, I didn't take this praise seriously before, but now I have to say that the younger generation will surpass us in time. The white-haired old general sighed with emotion, which aroused a burst of resonance among the people present. Yes, Lin Sun was only famous in the Forbidden City in the past, which belonged to the territory of the Empire. But now he had spread his prestige far and wide in the bloodthirsty battlefield, which made voodoo barbarians tremble. Originally, I was going to have a drink with you, but now there's an important thing to tell you. On the way back to the Forbidden City after leaving the gigantic Crescent City, Zhao Tailai sighed with a rare gloominess on his face. "What's the matter?" Lin Sun asked. At this moment, the two of them were sitting on a treasured ship that was flying beneath the sky. Just a few days ago, an elder of the heaven-reaching sword sect in the ancient Desolation territory came to the Empire with a group of descendants. Lin Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed when he heard this. Heaven-reaching sword sect. He was too familiar with this name, because Yun Qingbai, the enemy who killed the lineal descendants of Lin family, came from heaven-reaching sword sect. It could be said that the most important reason why Lin Sun insisted on going to the ancient Desolation territory was to avenge his parents and relatives. And the enemy was Yun Qingbai. What are they doing here? Lin Sun asked after a moment of silence. On the surface, Their purpose is very simple. They are here for the demoted ninth prince. They want to take the ninth prince to the ancient desolation territory for cultivation. Zhao Tailai explained patiently. You also know that the grandfather of the ninth prince is a powerful elder in heaven-reaching sword sect. After hearing what happened to the ninth prince, they naturally won't sit back and do nothing. Lin Sun nodded. He knew the cause and effect. More than 10 years ago, it was because the ninth prince Zhao Jingzhen and his mother Meng Rong leaked the news that Yun Qingbai, the future leader of heaven-reaching sword sect, knew that Lin Sun was born with the talent of devouring abyss. Then, in order to pursue the so-called perfect way, Yun Qingbai came to the empire alone and killed the Lin family. He killed all the lineal members of the Lin family overnight and dug out a part of the spiritual vein in Lin Sun's body, who was still a baby. Later, this matter caused the fury of the emperor, who abolished Meng Rong's imperial concubine position. However, due to the power of heaven-reaching sword sect, the emperor could only do so much. Meng Rong was finally taken away by her father, the elder of heaven-reaching sword sect, and left the empire. As for the ninth prince, Zhao Jingzhen, he was also neglected by the emperor. Some time ago, because of a grudge related to Lin Sun, the ninth prince was directly demoted and sent to the depths of the imperial palace to guard the tomb of the ancestors of the royal family. He was forbidden to go out for the rest of his life. However, Lin Sun didn't expect that heaven-reaching sword sect would send people to take away the ninth prince who was demoted and imprisoned. Obviously, it must be the grandfather of the ninth prince who was behind this. Lin Sun thought for a while and asked, since this is their purpose on the surface, what do they want to do behind the scenes? Zhao Tailai glanced at him and said, it should be related to you. Yun Qingbai already knows that I'm still alive? Lin Sun was shocked. Zhao Tailai nodded, but this is the empire. Even if Yun Qingbai comes, he won't dare to act recklessly. What's more, Yun Qingbai didn't come this time, so you don't have to worry about anything. Lin Sun was silent. Yun Qingbai, a famous first sword practitioner in the ancient desolation territory, was known as invincible under the king. It was said that he was wise, talented, decisive, and unscrupulous. He had never been defeated since he started his cultivation. Above his head, there were many eye-catching halos. He was like a god's favored one, feared and admired by countless practitioners in the ancient desolation territory. In the face of such an enemy, Lin Sun wanted to kill him immediately, but the reality was cruel after all. He was very sure that if he faced Yun Qingbai now, he would only have a small chance to kill him even with the help of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow. What was invincible under the king? Yun Qingbai didn't even put the half-step king in his eyes. Based on this, Lin Sun knew how powerful Yun Qingbai was. What's more, Lin Sun was worried that the information he knew was outdated. Yun Qingbai might have become stronger than before. Didn't Yun Qingbai come? Right, he seized my quintessent spirit vein over 10 years ago, and perhaps he's already stepped onto the perfect grand Tao that he pursues. So he naturally wouldn't care about how great of a storm I, a fellow that was only an infant in his eyes all those years ago, could cause. Lin Sun's expression was neither sad nor happy, and his voice was calm, or, even if he knows my existence, I'm afraid he doesn't care about it at all. But Zhao Tailai noticed that Lin Sun's state of mind at the moment was very wrong. He couldn't help saying, there is no priority in the fight for the Great Way. With your current ability, you don't need to belittle yourself. Lin Sun shook his head. Don't worry. I'm just stating a fact. Isn't it better? I hope he ignores my existence. In this case, when I go to him for revenge one day, I'll make him die more miserably. After returning to the Forbidden City, you stay on Heart-Cleansing Peak for a period of time. It's not too late to make other preparations after I find out what those people from heaven-reaching sword sect want to do. Zhao Tailai solemnly exhorted. Okay, Lin Sun agreed. In the evening, before Lin Sun returned to Heart-Cleansing Peak, he became more determined than ever when he looked at the familiar mountain gate. For the sake of Lin family today, as long as he was alive, he would never allow what had happened that year to happen again in the future. in the heart-cleansing hall at the top of heart-cleansing peak. As usual, Vulture summoned all the big shots of Lin family to discuss and arrange various affairs of the clan. Lin Zhong, Young Ku, Lin Huayan, Zhu Laosan, and others were all there. Outside the great hall, the Scarlet Eagle King puffed out his chest and stood proudly on the eaves of the great hall. His fiery red feathers were like burning divine flames, making him look extraordinarily handsome. Chirp! Suddenly, a round fat ball popped out from Young Ku's arms. It had round eyes, a round nose, and round ears. Its body was also very soft and round. It was very cute. It was Chirp. What's the matter, Chirp? Are you hungry? Young Ku was stunned. She thought that the little fellow was hungry. Chirp! The little fellow seemed to notice something. Its round body broke away from Young Ku's arms. It seemed to be very excited. It made a clear and urgent chirp from its mouth. Then it turned into a line of fire and rushed out of the hall. All the people who were discussing things were stunned. Chirp used to be very obedient. It was never as excited and abnormal as it was now. Everyone couldn't help looking out of the hall. Almost at the same time, Red Eagle King shouted with surprise outside the hall, "Master! Master is back!" Chapter 752. The head of the family was back. On Heart-Cleansing Peak, a group of big shots of Lin family were summoned and gathered in the hall of Heart-Cleansing Peak. Even old people such as Lin Cece, Lin Yunheng, and Lin Beiguang also came. Outside the hall, all the disciples of the Lin clan's branch family were like a dense black tide, and all of them stood solemnly and waited silently. Even further away, servants were like clouds and attendants like a forest, carefully serving them. It could be said that when Lin Sun came back, everyone on Heart-Cleansing Peak stopped what they were doing and came to see him. This kind of change was undoubtedly enough to prove that Lin Sun's status on Heart-Cleansing Peak was really different from before. In other words, this was the power of the head of the family. At this time, in the hall of Heart-Cleansing Peak, the atmosphere was also solemn. Vulture, Young Ku, Lin Zhong, Lin Huayan, Zhu Laosan, and other core figures were present in turn. At the same time, the important figures of the Lin family's collateral relatives also sat upright and still, not daring to show the slightest bit of neglect. Sitting in the central seat of honor, Lin Sun looked at the familiar faces in the hall, the disciples of Lin family outside the hall, as well as the well-trained servants and servants. Suddenly, he felt unprecedentedly calm and fulfilled. Since he entered the Forbidden City, didn't all his efforts just for what he saw in front of him? Now, Lin family finally stood in the Forbidden City again and rose with a strong posture. Its rising momentum was unstoppable. As Lin Sun's mood fluctuated, all the people in the hall were also looking at Lin Sun, who had disappeared for half a year. His body is stained with iron and blood, and his bearing is more and more stable. Compared with the past, he is undoubtedly a different person. Vulture sighed with emotion in his heart. He almost watched how Lin Sun achieved such achievements step by step in the Forbidden City. This boy has become more and more unfathomable. A strange color flashed in Young Ku's clear eyes. When he was in the bloodthirsty camp, Lin Sun was only a thin boy of 13 or 14 years old. Now, Lin Sun was already a famous overmatch in the world. His bearing was as vast as mountains and seas, and his mind was as broad as the sun and the moon. Even some powerful figures in the Forbidden City were inferior to Lin Sun in terms of demeanor. I can't see through him at all. Zhu Laosan was a little shocked under his reticent appearance. At that time, Lin Sun still needed his protection and care. But now, even he couldn't see through Lin Sun's strength. This undoubtedly meant that Lin Sun's strength had probably surpassed his. Lin Huayuan had been very nervous, his whole body tensed up. When he faced Lin Sun half a year ago, he didn't have such a strong feeling. But now, Lin Sun just sat casually and made him feel an unspeakable pressure, like a subject facing a superior who controlled the universe. It was not just Lin Huayuan. Even Lin Cece, Lin Yunheng, Lin Beiguang, and the other reincarnation developing realm powerhouses of the older generation were very reserved. From Lin Sun, They felt a kind of extremely terrible, bloody, murderous spirit, which made them shudder with fear. This shocked them and made them a little dazed. It had only been half a year, and this little fellow's strength had become even more terrifying. He was only at the heavenly abode realm. Yet he made these old fellows feel fearful and uncomfortable. This was undoubtedly too shocking. Lin Sun didn't deliberately show his power. This was a kind of temperament that he had honed through the killing in the bloodthirsty battlefield. At this moment, he wore moon-white clothes, had pitch-black long hair that hung down on his shoulders, a pair of eyes that were deep like an abyss, and his handsome and angular face was covered in a calm and indifferent expression. As he sat there casually, he emanated an otherworldly aura. But as long as one sensed carefully, it was not difficult to find that his chi was smooth and smooth, surging with an invisible iron-blooded murderous spirit, which gave him a kind of awe-inspiring majesty. This time, it won't be long before I leave for the ancient Desolation territory. First, it's to avenge the relatives and friends of our Lin family who were killed. Second, it's to seek my own path. In the solemn and silent atmosphere, Lin Sun opened his mouth. His voice was calm and clear, echoing in the hall. The hearts of everyone shook because this was a decision that they'd never expected. Before I leave, I hope to select a clansman with both ability and integrity from our Lin family to take charge of the Lin family on my behalf. This matter will be handled by Mr. Vulture and Grandad Zhou. If you have any objection to this decision, you may speak out. Lin Sun glanced at all the people in the hall when he said this. After a long time, there was still silence in the hall. No one showed any sign of opposition. Seeing this, Lin Sun directly made a decision. That's settled. When it comes to influence, our Lin family is not inferior to the middle-level forces now. After the clan meeting, Lin Sun was a little surprised when he was asked about the situation of Lin family in Heart-Cleansing Peak in the past 6 months. According to Lin Zhong, in the past 6 months, the rise of Lin family could be described as smooth and steady. Not only the industry owned by Lin family had more than doubled, but also they had further close cooperation with Keystone Business, Ning family, Gong family, and Yi family. In addition, the commune of spiritual tattooists, the spiritual tattoo branch of Green Deer School, and the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire also had frequent contacts with Lin family and carried out many cooperation. Most importantly, almost everyone in the Forbidden City knew that Lin family of Heart-Cleansing Peak was favored by the current emperor. Even the current emperor once wrote a calligraphy scroll of "Young Phoenix is more pure than old Phoenix," and gave it to Lin Sun. This was an honor that was hard to come by. Under such circumstances, it was hard for Lin family not to rise. Ho-ho, in terms of foundation, we may still be a little worse than the middle-level forces. But in terms of influence, no middle-level forces in the whole Forbidden City can compare with Lin family, Lin Zhong said proudly. Seeing this, Lin Sun also felt relaxed and thought that Zhao Tai-Lai, the old fox, was reassuring. At least what he had promised Lin Sun had been done. Lin Sun's trip to the bloodthirsty battlefield was worthwhile. While chatting, Lin Zhong suddenly said one thing. "By the way, a young man named Gu Liang came to visit you a few days ago. He said that he was your old friend, young master." Gu Liang? Lin Sun immediately remembered that the only friend he made when he was still in Donglin Town was Gu Liang. Gu Liang's father, Gu Yanping, was the shopkeeper of Golden Hall. He was shrewd and wise and gave Lin Sun a lot of care at that time. Gu Liang was also good. He inherited his father's business and had a calm and alert temperament. He could be called a good friend of Lin Sun. Lin Zhong said to himself, "Young master, I've inquired about him. Gu Liang is the young shopkeeper of Golden Hall. Speaking of it, Golden Hall is just a chamber of commerce in the southwestern province of the empire. It was only a few days ago that it expanded its power to the Forbidden City." Lin Sun asked, "Grandad Zhong, where's Gu Liang now?" Golden Hall recently opened a chamber of commerce in the eastern district of the Forbidden City. If I'm not mistaken, Chao Gu Liang must be there. Lin Zhong instantly judged that Gu Liang should not lie when he claimed to be an old friend of his young master. According to my understanding of him, If he came to see me, he would first confirm whether I was still on heart-cleansing peak or not. But he came directly a few days ago. There is something wrong with this matter. He must have encountered some tricky trouble. Lin Sun stood up and said, "Granddad Zhong, arrange it. I'm going to see Guliang." The eastern district of the Forbidden City. This place was extremely prosperous. Major businesses stood in it, attracting practitioners from all over the empire every day. More than 10 days ago, a new business named Golden Hall opened in this bustling area. However, it was strange that from the first day of Golden Hall's opening, there were constant troubles. Every day, a group of practitioners would block the door and prevent other guests from entering. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that they were making trouble. Today was no exception. It was noon, the busiest time of the day. Bustling pedestrians shuttled through this area. There was a lot of traffic, and people were sweating like rain. However, in front of the gate of Golden Hall, there was a human wall. It was a group of extremely capable practitioners. They blocked the gate and did not allow outsiders to approach. In the hall of Golden Hall, there was a duck's voice like a broken gong. "Little bastard, how many days have passed? Why didn't Lin family of Heart Cleansing Peak come out to help you? You're obviously using the name of Lin family to scare people." It was a middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache in a brocade robe. His saliva was flying, and his fingers almost poked Gu Yang's face. He was extremely arrogant. You're just like your father. You're ignorant and full of lies. Do you want to open Golden Hall in the Forbidden City? Wishful thinking. The middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache looked contemptuous and disdainful. You don't know the master of Lin family. Even if you know him, you can't change your situation. Remember, you and your father are the shame of Gu family. You're the abandoned pawns expelled from the Forbidden City. As long as Gu family is in the Forbidden City, you can't come back. On the opposite side, Gu Yang's face was ugly. His fingers were clenched tightly in his palm. There was a burst of anger and hatred in his chest. The middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache was called Gu Yong. According to the seniority, he was Gu Yang's third uncle. But Gu Yang knew that this third uncle didn't regard him as a relative at all. Even when he learned that Gu Yang returned to the Forbidden City, he intended to kill all of them. "What do you want?" Gu Yang suppressed his inner anger and said, "What do I want? This question is really naive." Gu Yang sneered, "But since you want to know, I'll tell you now." Speaking of this, he waved his hand and said heroically, "Come on, smash this bullshit Golden Hall for me. Kill anyone who dares to stop me." Chapter 753. Bang, bang, bang. In the main hall of Golden Hall, there was a burst of breaking sound. The clansmen of Gu family had already started to smash all the most precious items in the hall. "How dare you?" Gu Yang was completely furious. He rushed forward to stop them with his eyes wide open. "If you dare to do it, there will be a river of blood here." Gu Yang's eyes were gloomy. He inadvertently glanced at the distance, where a group of servants and waiters of Golden Hall were standing and shivering with fear. "You've gone too far." Gu Yang was trembling with anger, and his eyes were red. Those servants and waiters were innocent. If they were implicated because of him, he would feel guilty. The more he acted like this, the more complacent Gu Yang was. He laughed and said, "Is there anything we dare not do to deal with you, little bastard?" Those people of Gu family who were smashing Golden Hall also burst into laughter. Gu Yang was so angry that he said with a livid face, "I said that Golden Hall is not just mine and my father's. Don't you worry that the head of Lin family will punish you for doing this? At that time, I'm afraid that your Gu family can't bear it together." Gu Yang's face suddenly darkened, and he said coldly, "How dare you threaten us with Lin family at such a time? If the head of Lin family has something to do with Golden Hall, why have you been indifferent to it these days?" Gu Yang was speechless, but his face became more and more gloomy. Seeing that his newly opened shop was smashed like this, he felt a stabbing pain in his heart and was about to bleed. "Just give up," Gu Yang said disdainfully. "If the head of Lin family comes in person today, I can even kneel and kowtow to him. But obviously, it's impossible. Now in the Forbidden City, everyone knows that the head of Lin family is a peerless talent with a great reputation. Even the top forces dare not provoke him. How could such a dazzling figure have anything to do with your bullshit Golden Hall? A few days ago, he also led a group of clansmen to smash Golden Hall, but he was frightened by the relationship between Gu Liang and the head of Lin family. Finally, he left in a panic. But soon he noticed that the Lin family did not respond at all to the encounter of Golden Hall. Thus, Gu Yong instantly turned furious from embarrassment. He felt that he'd been tricked, so he led his clansmen to make a comeback. At first, he was also a little worried, so when he targeted Golden Hall, he did not dare to go too far. But after many days of probing, he found that Lin family of heart-cleansing peak still didn't move at all, which made Gu Yong finally confirm that he was fooled by Gu Liang. This little bastard was trying to scare him with his tiger skin. Feeling ashamed and angry, Gu Yong came here with a murderous look. He decided not to hold back anymore. He would completely destroy Golden Hall and let Gu Liang, the little bastard, get out of the Forbidden City. It was precisely because of these thoughts that Gu Yong dared to speak with such confidence. At this moment, he was even very proud of himself for seeing through Gu Liang's lies and exposing this kid's sinister intentions. You'll regret this. Gu Liang looked stupefied. In his field of vision, the originally beautiful Golden Hall was now a scene of devastation. It was in a mess and destroyed beyond recognition, which made his heart twitch. Regret. Gu Yong laughed. I, Gu Yong, have never regretted doing things. Flop. Flop. At this moment, the practitioners of the Gu family who formed a human wall at the entrance of Golden Hall flew up like broken kites, as if they had been hit by a primeval bull. They fell hard in the hall and rolled in a large area. Screams and wails followed. How dare you? Who the hell dares to obstruct my Gu family? Gu Yong's smile suddenly froze, and then he roared angrily. You said that as long as I come, you will kneel and kowtow. Now, you not only don't kneel, but also dare to speak rudely to me. How dare you? With a flat voice, a handsome young man walked into the hall of Golden Hall accompanied by an old man. Who are you? Gu Yong's pupils shrank, and he looked a little surprised. Those practitioners of Gu family who were smashing Golden Hall had long been shocked by the movement just now. At this moment, they all stopped what they were doing and looked over. Kneel first, and then talk to me. The young man was naturally Lin's son. He glanced at Gu Yong and didn't pay attention to him anymore. Instead, he looked at Gu Liang. I'm late. Lin's son was a little apologetic. Gu Liang shook his head and revealed a heartfelt smile. You're not late. At least in the Forbidden City, we finally meet again. If you are. At this moment, Gu Yong's eyes suddenly widened as if he had guessed something. He was completely dumbfounded as if he had seen a ghost. Flop. At this time, Lin Zhong stepped forward and patted Gu Yong lightly with his palm. Gu Yong knelt down with a flop, and the bones in his knees were broken in an instant. The pain made his cheeks twist, and he gasped. He dared not cry out because he was really scared. His forehead was dripping with cold sweat, and he looked like he had been frightened. If his guess was right, then the identity of the young man in front of him would be obvious. However, Gu Yong couldn't figure out how such a peerless figure, who was famous throughout the empire and was said to be crowned all over the capital, could have a connection with the unknown Golden Hall. It felt as if a divine dragon in the heavens had formed a connection with an ant on the ground. It was truly inconceivable. Didn't you hear my young master's words? Kneel and talk. Lin Zhong warned and stood beside Lin's son with his hands folded in front of him. Next to them, those practitioners of Gu family were also stunned. An old man and a young man suddenly arrived and easily broke through the human wall that blocked the entrance of the hall. After that, they walked into the hall in a composed manner as if they were taking a leisurely stroll in the courtyard. That invisible, imposing manner caused them to be awed, especially when they saw Gu Yong, a strong practitioner of Tao Insight Realm, kneeling on the ground with a casual slap. Those practitioners of Gu family felt their hearts tremble and their faces change dramatically. This time, it seemed that they had really kicked an iron plate. Outside the Golden Hall, many practitioners, including some powerful figures, had already gathered to watch the fun. When they saw the practitioners of the Gu family, who had been arrogant and brazenly smashing other people's shops a moment ago, were now crushed and intimidated like chickens and dogs, these onlookers couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Who was so bold to intervene in the action of Gu family? Although Gu family was not as prominent as the 7 top aristocratic families, it was still one of the middle-level aristocratic families in the empire. In the past, they had never been treated like this. Immediately, a sharp-eyed practitioner recognized something and couldn't help crying out, "God, it's Lin's son." After half a year, he shows up again. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Suddenly, there was an uproar outside Golden Hall. Finally, they realized that no wonder the young man dared to treat the people of Gu family like this. It turned out that the fierce and famous young man had come. This time, Gu family really kicked an iron plate. Many practitioners couldn't help but gloat. Some practitioners who admired Lin Sun couldn't help volunteering for the mission. "Child Lin, do you need our help? These members of the Gu clan have gone too far. They've actually done such a vile thing in public, and it's simply infuriating. Young Master Lin, we're willing to lend you a hand and eliminate these utterly heartless villains." Hearing the noise outside the hall, Gu Yong, who was kneeling on the ground, almost fainted. How could he expect that he would fall on a lie in the end? He had been so cautious. No, this was not a fucking lie at all. At the thought of this, Gu Yong wanted to slap himself. How could he really provoke the head of Lin family of heart-cleansing peak? When he thought of some of the ferocious deeds this fierce man had done in the Forbidden City in the past, Gu Yong wanted to die. He couldn't find any words to describe his mood at the moment. Fear, regret, maybe all of them. In a word, Gu Yong's face was very gloomy at this moment, as if he had lost his parents. I remember that the last time we met in Mist City, it was almost the same scene. Why did such a thing happen in the Forbidden City? Lin Sun ignored others and just looked at Gu Yong. It's a long story. Gu Yong sighed. These matters are actually related to some grudges between my father and the Gu clan, and they're all old matters. I originally thought that my father and I had already exercised enough forbearance and compromise, but I never imagined that even now, the Gu clan still doesn't intend to let it go. The two of them chatted casually on the side, ignoring everyone else present. But the more they behaved like this, the more frightened and uneasy Gu Yong and those clansmen of Gu family became. The feeling of being out of control and waiting to be punished almost made them collapse. Outside the hall of Golden Hall, more and more people gathered. They were all practitioners who heard that Lin Sun appeared here and came to watch the fun. Lin Sun had been silent for half a year and hadn't shown up. The movement of such a peerless talent had attracted a lot of attention. Now he appeared in an unknown business, which could be imagined how great the sensation was. "I'm Gu Tianzhong. I'm here to ask for forgiveness with a group of clansmen." Not long after, an old voice sounded outside the Golden Hall. The crowd outside Golden Hall to watch the fun was separated, and an old man came in a hurry with a group of men and women. Finally, he stopped outside Golden Hall and bowed in unison. This scene immediately shocked many practitioners because they recognized that the old man, Gu Tianzhong, was the current patriarch of Gu family. This was the ruler of a medium-sized aristocratic force. In the eyes of ordinary practitioners, he was absolutely a big shot with great power. Similarly, the group of men and women beside Gu Tianzhong were also the real power figures of Gu family. There were elders, deacons, and there were many famous figures. Chapter 754. Outside Golden Hall, it was dead silent. Although there were many onlookers, when they saw Gu Tianzhong, such a powerful figure, came with a group of senior members of Gu family and put on a humble posture to ask for forgiveness. Who wouldn't be shocked? In the past, there were countless rumors about Lin Sun in the Forbidden City, and his legendary deeds were known to all. But these were rumors after all. When they saw this scene, those practitioners present finally fully realized how powerful Lin Sun was. A leader of a middle-level aristocratic force came to apologize in person, which invisibly reflected how amazing Lin Sun's power was in the Forbidden City now. In Golden Hall, Gu Yong, who knelt on the ground, completely collapsed. Even the patriarch came to apologize in person, which made him realize that he really made a big trouble this time. Even if he could escape today, he was doomed to have no place in Gu's family in the future. Thinking of this, Gu Yong almost cried. How could he know that he would provoke the master of heart-cleansing Peak, who was the most powerful figure in the Forbidden City, just to deal with an abandoned son of the clan? Those people of Gu family who came with Gu Yong were also anxious at the moment, as if they were mourning the death of their parents. Just now, they were swaggering and smashing Golden Hall wantonly in an arrogant and unscrupulous manner. But now, they were completely withered like frosted eggplants. Here comes the leader. What are you going to do with him? Lin Sun casually glanced at Gu Tianzhong and others outside the hall, and then looked at Gu Liang. At this moment, Gu Liang was slightly stunned as well. He was similarly slightly shocked. From the beginning until the end, Lin Sun hadn't said anything at all, nor had he done anything. But now, Gu Tianzhong had led the higher-ups of the Gu family to personally pay a visit and apologize. It was a little difficult for Gu Liang to adapt to it. After a while, he finally realized that Lin Sun was completely different from the Lin Sun he knew. Gu Liang wanted to say something, but he saw that Gu Tianzhong and other senior figures outside the hall all looked at him with a hint of anxiety and pleading in their eyes. This made Gu Liang a little absent-minded for a while. In the final analysis, he was also a member of Gu family, but he was expelled from the clan in those years. In the past, even though Gu Tianzhong and his clansmen had caused Gu Liang to hate them to the core, he had no choice but to admit that they were too powerful. But now, when he saw these big shots looking at him with pleading expressions, Gu Liang found this comedic change hard to believe. Lin Sun saw Gu Liang's hesitation and said, "If there is any hatred that can't be resolved, let me help you deal with it." When they heard these words, the hearts of Gu Tianzhong and the others outside the hall constricted abruptly, and their expressions went grim. If they allowed this incomparably ferocious young devil god Lin Sun to make a move, then even if their Gu clan gave it their all, they would probably be unable to gain the slightest advantage. Fortunately, Gu Yang interrupted Lin Sun before he finished. "Let me handle it." A single sentence caused Gu Tianzhong and the others to instantly feel relaxed. They felt as if they had been freed, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun's gaze looked towards them. Even though his expression was calm, it caused the hearts of Gu Tianzhong and the others to tremble, and they lowered their heads successively and actually didn't dare meet Lin Sun's gaze. "I have a share in Golden Hall, but now it has been smashed beyond recognition by your people. I hope you can come up with a satisfactory explanation," Lin Sun said casually. Gu Tianzhong, sweating profusely, hurriedly said, "Please rest assured, Child Lin. Our Gu clan will compensate you tenfold and hundredfold, and severely punish the perpetrators." After that, he couldn't help but feel a surge of anger in his heart. He just wanted to slap Gu Yong and the others to death now. Why did they provoke Lin Sun, the little devil? Didn't they know that the two top forces of the Zhua clan and the Qin clan were defeated by this little devil and had to admit defeat in the end? Not to mention these, just based on the Emperor's favor to this little devil, who would be tired of living and provoke this kid in the Forbidden City. But it happened these bastards didn't have eyes. At the thought of this, Gu Tianzhong even had the intention to kill. Seeing this, Lin Sun knew that Gu Liang must have no intention of gathering and chatting. So he immediately said goodbye and said, "When you deal with these things, come to heart-cleansing Peak to find me. Let's have a good drink together." Okay, Gu Liang happily agreed. Lin Sun didn't delay any longer and immediately left with Lin Zhong. From beginning to end, he didn't look at Gu Tianzhong and others. Outside the Golden Hall, a crowd of onlookers rushed forward to greet Lin Sun warmly when they saw him coming out. "Child Lin, we have admired you for a long time. I wonder if we can have a drink together? Grandmaster Lin, I'm a spiritual tattooist from Southwest Province. Do you still accept disciples?" The eyes of these practitioners were hot and eager, and their faces were full of admiration. They crowded around Lin Sun's way, which was a spectacular scene. "Child Lin, I heard that you haven't got married yet." Even some young girls summoned up their courage to come forward, took out the jade pendant they carried with them affectionately and wanted to give it to Lin Sun with a blushing face. Lin Sun was a little overwhelmed at once. Fortunately, Lin Zhong was there to protect him. Then he squeezed out of the enthusiastic crowd. When Gu Tianzhong and others saw this scene, they couldn't help sighing in their hearts. Child Lin was unparalleled in the world and was crowned all over the capital. Looking at this scene, they knew that this title was really not boasted. When Gu Tianzhong inadvertently glanced at Gu Liang in the distance, he suddenly thought of something. If I can make good use of today's event, maybe I can turn misfortune into fortune and build a relationship with Lin family. At the thought of this, Gu Tianzhong took a deep breath, put on a kind smile, walked into Golden Hall and sighed. Gu Liang, our Gu family has treated you and your father badly these years. Alas, as an elder, I'm really ashamed. Lin Sun didn't intend to intervene in the internal grievances between Gu Liang and Gu family. He believed that since Gu family knew the relationship between him and Gu Liang, they would never dare to have any thoughts against Gu Liang. However, when Lin Sun got on the chariot and was about to return a heart-cleansing peak, he saw a handsome young man standing in front of his chariot. Are you Lin Sun? The handsome young man was dressed in a plain robe with long hair coiled in a bun. He looked very young, in his teens, with a spirit of spirituality. But there was a looming arrogance in his eyes, and he even called Lin Sun's name directly. Whose family is this little guy? How can you talk like that? Get out of the way. Don't block child Lin's way. Some practitioners next to him were very dissatisfied and scolded him one after another, thinking that the young man was too rude. The handsome young man stood there, not moving at all. His lips curled into a smile. He didn't move at all and ignored all the scolding. Yes, Lin Sun nodded. He was keenly aware that the breath of this handsome young man was very unusual, with a unique charm. My name is Chun Feng. I come from heaven-reaching sword sect. My master is Qing Zhe, an inherited disciple of the inner core. The handsome youth introduced himself. It was obvious that he was just a servant, but his expression was very calm. There was a restrained conceit about him, and he seemed to be full of confidence. Heaven-reaching sword sect. Lin Sun's heart skipped a beat, but he said, "Oh, why are you looking for me?" At the same time, the practitioners nearby were also surprised and realized that something was wrong. Some of the older practitioners even changed their expressions, because they all knew that the heaven-reaching sword sect was an extremely ancient orthodoxy in the ancient Desolation region. It was so rich that it could look down on the entire cultivation world of the empire. I am following my master's order to challenge you. Chun Feng took out a sealed golden letter and passed it to Lin Sun with a flick of his finger. This action was not polite at all. As long as one was not stupid, one could feel that there was a hidden arrogance in Chun Feng. Even though he was just a servant, he did not take Lin Sun seriously. This made many practitioners present feel uncomfortable, and they frowned. Lin Sun was now a peerless talent who was famous all over the world, and he had many brilliant achievements, but now he was looked down upon by a servant. This attitude seemed to be very problematic. However, Lin Sun smiled disapprovingly and said, "Go back and tell your master that I am very busy and have no time to play this boring game with him." As he spoke, the sealed letter suddenly flashed and flew back, falling lightly under Chun Feng's feet. And Lin Sun had already boarded the carriage. "Lin Sun, don't you say that you are the best in the capital? Why don't you dare to accept my master's challenge?" Chun Feng was not enraged. He only looked at the carriage with a hint of disdain in his voice. "Let's go." Lin Sun did not bother to pay attention to this person and ordered Lin Zhong to drive the carriage away. "Little guy, if you dare to stand in my way, I don't mind killing you." Lin Zhong glanced at Chun Feng coldly. As he spoke, the carriage started and went into the distance. Chun Feng wanted to stop him, but when he saw Lin Zhong's determined and cold eyes, he suddenly narrowed his eyes and stopped. "Lin Sun, I forgot to tell you that you have to accept this challenge, even if you don't want to. Just wait and see. No one can refuse my master's decision." Chun Feng said loudly and clearly. His voice was so loud that all the practitioners nearby could hear it clearly. They all realized that something was wrong. It was just a challenge, which could be refused. But now, according to Qin Feng's words, his master was determined to fight with Lin Sun. An inherited disciple from the heaven-reaching sword sect in the ancient Desolation territory insisted on doing so. It was obvious that he came with bad intentions. On that day, the Forbidden City was in an uproar. The news that Lin Sun appeared in Golden Hall after half a year of silence was spread. At the same time, the news that Qing Zhe, a disciple of the heaven-reaching sword sect, issued a letter of challenge to Lin Sun also spread like wildfire, causing a great disturbance. All the major forces were alarmed and began to pay attention to it. No one expected that after disappearing for half a year, Lin Sun would cause such a big movement as soon as he showed up. The successor of the heaven-reaching sword sect actually wanted to challenge Lin Sun. This was absolutely a big event. Many forces began to take action and began to inquire about Qing Zhe. They were shocked when they heard the news. The origin and strength of Qing Zhe were completely beyond everyone's expectation. Chapter 755. Qing Zhe. He was a core disciple of the Heavenly Sword sect at the early stage of the reincarnation developing realm. He was a direct descendant of the green crane bloodline of the ancient Desolation realm. He was one of the most outstanding rising stars of the Heavenly Sword sect, possessing the first-grade innate attribute, Absolute Azure Battle Chi. A few days ago, Qing Zhe had come to Xiao Empire with Elder Gu Daunting of the Heavenly Sword sect and received a grand reception from the imperial family. At that banquet, a sensational event had taken place. At that time, an important figure of the imperial family called Zhao Guangxiu had proposed a toast to Qing Zhe, but he had flatly refused, saying, "You can propose a toast to me, but you are not qualified." His words had changed the atmosphere of the scene. This was especially true for Zhao Guangxiu. She couldn't find a way out of this embarrassing situation. He was a marquis of the imperial family. Not only had he proposed a toast to Qing Zhe, but Qing Zhe had also rudely said that he was not qualified to propose a toast to him. This was an obvious insult. Then how about I propose a toast to you? There are some people who couldn't bear to watch this, stepping forward bravely and coldly speaking. This was a king of virtue and prestige, someone who had a great reputation. But to everyone's surprise, Qing Zhe refused again without even batting an eyelid. "You are not qualified either." The atmosphere suddenly became deathly silent and oppressive. Those present were all famous and influential figures of the empire, and there was no lack of outstanding figures. But at this moment, they were all infuriated by Qing Zhe's arrogant and rude attitude. "Then who do you think is qualified to propose a toast to you?" An important figure asked coldly. Qing Zhe had been very calm from beginning to end. He drank by himself and said indifferently, "Whoever can take 3 of my swords is qualified to propose a toast to me." Only now did all the great figures present realize that the reason Qing Zhe was so arrogant and rude was because he thought too highly of himself. He felt that it was impossible for a marquis and a king that had just toasted him to be able to withstand the might of 3 of his sword strikes in a contest of strength. This was too arrogant. The important figures present were not only of high status and noble identity, but they were also influential figures whose cultivation was almost no weaker than the reincarnation developing realm. However, this Qing Zhe dared to say such arrogant words in such a situation. Naturally, this made everyone feel very uncomfortable. If not for the fact that the other party was from the Heavenly Sword sect, they would have long since chased this arrogant brat away. In the end, Major General Yu Wenzhong of the Southern Fire Army couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up and wanted to toast Qing Zhe with his strength and teach him a lesson. Yu Wenzhong was a top cultivator at the Reincarnation Development Realm. He fought and killed all year round and had rich battle experience. But under the astonished gazes of the crowd, he was defeated by Cyan Zhe's sword. Or it could be said that Yu Wenzhong didn't even manage to block a single sword strike before he was shaken to the point his body staggered back over a dozen steps. In the end, he couldn't help but cough up blood on the spot. On the other hand, from the beginning until the end, Qing Zhe still sat upright before the table while holding a cup of wine in his hand, and not a single drop of wine had spilled out when he swung his sword. His calm and composed attitude caused all the great figures present to be shocked. This first sword strike of mine is called daybreak. It's like the sun that has just risen, and everywhere its light covers, the darkness will collapse into nothingness. Unfortunately, you weren't even able to resist my first sword strike, so what qualifications do you have to drink with me? Qing sighed lightly on the spot, and he seemed to be slightly dispirited. These words were simply like teaching a lesson to a junior, and his attitude caused the expressions of all the great figures of the empire to become even more unsightly. On the other hand, Yuan Zhong was even more humiliated and furious, and he was provoked to the point of flicking his sleeve and leaving on the spot. Ha, what an arrogant student! In next to no time, another great figure stood out. This was a marquis of the imperial family, and he possessed a cultivation at the perfection stage of the reincarnation development realm. When he was young, he'd once slaughtered a real flood dragon, and he was absolutely a ruthless figure with extraordinary combat strength. But in the end, even though he'd blocked Qing's sword strike, he'd suffered a heavy injury because of it. When Qing slashed out a second time, he retreated in the end and didn't dare bear the brunt of the attack. This caused everyone present to be astounded. A great cultivator at the perfection stage of the reincarnation development realm of the older generation was merely able to block a single sword strike from Qingzhe. This seemed to be too shocking, because everyone was able to discern that Qingzhe was merely at the initial stage of the reincarnation development realm, and he was at most a little over 20 years of age. Could it be that this was the ability of an inner sect disciple of the Heavenly Sword Sect? Qing just said indifferently, "My second sword strike is called Remit Frost. Once it's executed, all living things wither and all life is destroyed. You can be proud that you forced me to execute this sword strike." A dignified marquis of the empire had been defeated, and he was even criticized in such a manner. This was no different from ridicule and ridicule. In the end, the marquis was so angry that his face turned green, and he left in a rage. Next, great figures stood out one after another, and every one of them could be said to be an illustrious figure of the older generation. But in the end, they were all defeated by Qing like a hot knife through butter. From the beginning until the end, no one had been able to block Qing's second sword strike. At this point, the atmosphere of the banquet had become extremely stiff, and the faces of all the great figures of the empire were ashen, and they were silent. All of this was too great a blow to them. A young man from the Heavenly Sword Sect had successively defeated one of their top figures, and the impact and shock they felt was indescribable and depressing. Similarly, Qing's strength was also amazing. He didn't stand up from the beginning to the end. He was casual and calm, drinking and waving his sword, which seemed very relaxed and perfunctory. But the more he behaved like this, the more people couldn't see through him. It was impossible to guess how terrible the power would be when Qingzhe attacked with all his strength. In the end, the banquet ended on a bad note. But the performance of Qingzhe at the banquet soon spread out, which made all the major forces in the Forbidden City fall into an unprecedented shock. He was too strong. It was incredible that a successor disciple of the Heavenly Sword Sect defeated many great figures of the empire while talking and laughing and drinking. Under such circumstances, it caused such a great sensation in the Forbidden City on this day when it was suddenly heard that Qingzhe, the successor of the Heavenly Sword Sect, took the initiative to issue a letter of challenge to Lin, the head of Heart Cleansing Peak. It was really incredible. At the royal banquet, Qingzhe flatly refused the toast of a group of great figures without giving them any face. But now, he took the initiative to challenge Lin Sun, which seemed very strange. Nowadays, everyone knew that Lin Sun could be called the peerless talent of the young generation of the empire and had the dazzling title of crowning the whole capital. But then again, Lin Sun was just in the Tao Insight realm after all. But Qingzhe, who was in the early stage of reincarnation development realm, didn't challenge a great practitioner with higher cultivation than him, but Lin Sun, who was in a lower realm than him. Of course, it seemed very strange. Something big is going to happen. Many practitioners were worried. Subconsciously, they all regarded Lin Sun as one of their own. After all, they were all practitioners of the empire, while Qingzhe was an outsider from the ancient Desolation territory. Under such circumstances, they would definitely choose to stand on Lin Sun's side. But thinking of Qingzhe's terrible strength, even the practitioners of the empire doubted whether Lin Sun had a chance to win if he really accepted the challenge. Qingzhe's gone too far. Lin Sun is the leader of the young generation of our empire. Once Lin Sun is defeated by him, doesn't it mean that all the practitioners of the young generation of the empire will be under his feet? There were also practitioners who were extremely resentful. It's definitely not so simple. Don't forget that the bloody incident that happened in Heart-Cleansing Peak more than 10 years ago was done by a descendant of the Heaven-Reaching Sword sect. Now, Qingzhe from the Heaven-Reaching Sword sect points his spear at Lin Sun. Is it possible that he wants to kill Lin Sun completely? There was also a practitioner of the older generation who was shocked. He thought that Qingzhe did this for another purpose, to destroy Lin Sun. Alas, who could imagine that Lin Sun, who had been silent for half a year, was targeted by Qingzhe as soon as he showed up today and caused such a stir? It's hard to predict whether he will be lucky or not. Fortunately, I heard that Lin Sun has refused this challenge and said casually that he has no time to fool around with Qingzhe. No, this challenge has attracted the attention of the whole Forbidden City. Under such circumstances, if Lin Sun flinches and avoids the challenge, he will not only lose his face. All kinds of comments, like a hurricane, set off in every corner of the Forbidden City. Overnight, the challenge between Qingzhe and Lin Sun became the hottest topic and attracted everyone's attention. Would Lin Sun accept the challenge? Everyone was paying close attention to it. On the top of Heart-Cleansing Peak, the clouds and mist were misty, and the mountain was dense. The scenery was beautiful. Lin Sun sat there casually. There was a huge rectangular black jade in front of him. The jade was full of mysterious and obscure fluctuations. In the jade, there was a little girl lying quietly. The little girl wore a black cloak, and she had a breathtakingly beautiful face. Her beauty was like a masterpiece created by the heavens, and it was sufficient to make the world dim in comparison. She lay quietly on the jade stone, her hands interlaced on her lower abdomen, forming a strange seal. Her eyes were closed, and her expression was tranquil. As she breathed, there was a unique rhythm, as if she had fallen into an eternal slumber. It could be clearly seen that wisps of black brilliance, like the eternal night, flew up and down her body like a light rain. The little girl was Xia's solstice, who was carrying out the second quietus. I don't know when this girl will wake up after a long time. Lin Sun took back his eyes and sighed in his heart. Xia solstice practiced the mysterious 9 revolutions nirvana scripture. Every time her power was awakened, it would be accompanied by a quietus, which produced a new transformation similar to reincarnation. This was the second quietus of Xia solstice, which had started before Lin Sun went to the Soul Oblivion Sea. Unfortunately, this quietus had not ended until now, which seemed to be too long. Finally, Lin Sun carefully put Xia's solstice, who was sleeping in the black jade, into the first floor of the wordless pagoda. Lin Sun had decided to take Xia's solstice with him when he went to the ancient Desolation territory, because when this little girl woke up from the quietus, her previous memory would be completely cut off and erased. The only person she could remember was him. Young master, things are not good. Qingzhe, the future leader of the Sky-Reaching Sword sect, has come in person. Now he is waiting outside our Heart-Cleansing Peak. In the distance, Lin Zhong suddenly ran in a hurry. Hey! Chapter 756. Did he just block the door? Lin Sun was stunned. Yesterday, he just refused the challenge from Qingzhe. But it was only a day later that Qingzhe came to Heart-Cleansing Peak, which surprised Lin Sun. Yes, this man is very calm. He prepared his own desk and futon and sat in front of Heart-Cleansing Peak, drinking and sipping tea. It seems that if you don't show up, he will definitely wait like this. Lin Zhong frowned and looked a little dignified. Just now, he had personally seen Qingzhe. This young man's appearance was handsome, and he had a pair of brilliant green pupils. As he sat there casually, his bearing was outstanding, calm, and unhurried. He was definitely an extremely terrifying expert. When he thought that Qingzhe had easily defeated the big shots of the Empire at the royal banquet a few days ago, Lin Zhong became more and more worried. With the cultivation of the early stage of reincarnation developing realm, Qingzhe was able to defeat the older generation of reincarnation developing realm practitioners of the Empire. From beginning to end, no one could resist his 3 swords, which was too terrible. It was definitely not good news for Lin Zhong that such a young man with a terrible background, cultivation, and combat capability insisted on challenging Lin Sun. I heard that no one could resist his 3 swords after arriving at the Forbidden City. Lin Sun was thoughtful. That's true. Lin Zhong nodded and said worriedly, "Young master, this man is not friendly. Since he insists on doing this, I'm afraid his intention is not simple." Of course, as a practitioner of reincarnation developing realm, he took the initiative to challenge me. Even a blind man can see that something is wrong. Lin Sun said casually, "I even suspect that Qingzhe is instructed by Yun Qingbai." Yun Qingbai. At the mention of this name, Lin Zhong's eyes also showed deep hatred. More than 10 years ago, the lineal clansmen of Lin family were all killed by this man. "Young master, how are you going to deal with it? As long as he doesn't make trouble, let him sit there and drink tea. I'm not in a mood to fight with a guy with bad intentions." Lin Sun answered calmly. As he spoke, he had already taken out the wordless pagoda. When the old toad returned from the Soul Oblivion Sea, it had started to cultivate in seclusion to make a breakthrough, but until now, there was no sign of it breaking out of seclusion. Lin Sun sensed carefully and found that old toad's breath was smooth and smooth, which made him feel relieved. This proved that old toad didn't encounter any danger during its closed-door training. According to old toad, he'll need at least 1 to 3 years to complete this breakthrough. If that's the case, I'm afraid I'll have left for the ancient desolation territory by then. Lin was lost in thought. Lin Zhong, who was at the side, finally confirmed that what the young master said just now wasn't a joke. He really didn't intend to fight with Qingzhe. That's good too. At least I don't have to worry about young master being in any danger. Lin Zhong accepted the order and left. Outside Heart Cleansing Peak, a figure appeared on the originally wide and flat road. Even though he was sitting cross-legged on a praying mat, his posture was still extremely straight. He had long silver hair, like brilliant silver brilliance. His eyes were cyan, flowing with frightening luster when they opened and closed. On the table in front of him, there was a pot of wine and a pot of tea. At this moment, he was drinking comfortably as if he was in his own courtyard. He seemed very comfortable and free. This person was Qingzhe, the inherited disciple of the heaven-reaching sword sect. He was very young, in his 20s. His forehead was full, and his skin was like crystal jade, enshrouded with brilliant luster. His temperament was very extraordinary and refined. Beside Qingzhe, Chen Feng, a servant, stood upright. Although he was a servant, he was handsome and had an outstanding temperament. His style was far beyond that of ordinary practitioners. The master and the servant waited there like this, appearing to be fearless and full of confidence. The arrival of Qingzhe completely made the area outside Heart Cleansing Peak the focus of the major forces in the Forbidden City. At this moment, in the nearby area, there were dense figures of practitioners, all watching and paying close attention to it. Qingzhe is too strong. He came directly and blocked in front of the gate of Lin family. He's forcing Lin family to abdicate. Some practitioners were secretly shocked. It's conceivable that if Lin Sun doesn't accept the challenge, Qingzhe will never give up. No, if Lin Sun doesn't accept the challenge, the impact will be far more than that. It will make everyone think that Lin Sun is afraid and doesn't come out. This will definitely be a heavy blow to Lin Sun's prestige. Many practitioners analyzed and finally came to a unanimous conclusion. If Qingzhe was allowed to block the gate of Heart Cleansing Peak, the longer it took, the more disadvantageous it would be to Lin Sun's prestige. Now, Lin Sun had the title of crowning the whole capital. He was a peerless and leader-like figure in the younger generation of the empire. If even he didn't dare to accept the challenge from Qing Shi, didn't it mean that the younger generation of the empire had been trampled under Qing Shi's feet? The impact was a little serious. He's going too far. He is only at the early stage of reincarnation developing realm, but he wants to fight with Lin Sun, who is at the Tao insight realm. This is obviously bullying. There were also practitioners who were indignant. Alas, it's not a big deal. At the royal banquet a few days ago, didn't a big shot of reincarnation developing realm, who was stronger than Qing Shi, also take action? But the final result, you all know. Under such circumstances, even if Lin Sun accepts the challenge, his chance to win is slim. Someone sighed. Before the challenge began, it had set off a big wave in the Forbidden City and attracted the attention of the whole city. Many practitioners were eager for Lin Sun to take action and teach Qing Shi from the ancient wilderness territory a lesson, so as to break his spirit and make the empire proud. But at the same time, many practitioners were not optimistic and thought that Lin Sun had almost no hope of winning. After all, Cyange's combat power was so great that even a great practitioner at the consummation of reincarnation development realm couldn't resist his 3 swords, let alone Lin Sun, who only had the cultivation of Tao insight realm. What should come will come after all. In the distance, Zhao Tailai also came in person, but compared with the pessimism of other practitioners, he looked a little different at the moment. If Qing Shi knew Lin Sun's fierce performance in the bloodthirsty battlefield, I don't know whether he would dare to block the gates so openly. Zhao Tailai's mood at the moment was really wonderful, with a hint of schadenfreude. Some of the bigwigs from the Imperial Army also wore strange expressions and remained silent, as if they were waiting to watch a good show. Others didn't know, but they all knew how much Lin Sun had made in the bloodthirsty battlefield in the past 6 months. 4 or 5 half-step King Realm practitioners were killed by him. Under such circumstances, Qing Shi took the initiative to challenge Lin Sun. Did he really think that Lin Sun, a young man at the Tao insight realm, was easy to bully? Of course, they wouldn't warn Qing Shi. They were all waiting to see Qing Shi's good performance. However, to everyone's surprise, it didn't take long for a servant of Lin family of heart-cleansing peak to come out and say, "My master is busy now and has no time to pay attention to these things. If child Qing Shi wants, you can drink and have tea here." With that, he swaggered off. All the people present were stunned. Obviously, Lin Sun directly refused the challenge and left Qing Shi here. It seemed that he didn't intend to pay attention to Qing Shi at all. How would he do this? Isn't he afraid to fight? Lin Sun has never been afraid of these things before. Many practitioners were very disappointed. They thought that Lin Sun's action was undoubtedly encouraging Qing Shi's arrogance and weakening his own prestige. Qing Shi is nothing. Should we accept his challenge? What a joke. I think Child Lin's action is very wise and gratifying. There were also many practitioners who expressed their support for Lin Sun's action. How dare he be so rude? It's okay for him to say that he doesn't dare to accept the challenge, but he has to come up with so many reasons. It's despicable. In the distance, Chun Feng frowned and disdained Lin Sun's decision. He thought that Lin Sun was timid and didn't dare to accept the challenge. Qing Shi was very calm. He held the teacup and sipped the tea and said calmly, "It doesn't matter. Let's wait. I have enough patience. Sooner or later, he will have to come out and fight." "Master, with your current status and cultivation, why do you have to do this?" Chun Feng was a little puzzled. He thought that Lin Sun was not qualified to fight with Qing Shi at all, but Qing Shi insisted on doing this. According to what I know, this person should have set foot on the legendary path of the strongest Tao. I'm very curious. In a mortal world, the Tao is incomplete, but this person can achieve this step. Don't you think it's interesting? Qing Shi said leisurely, playing with the green mutton fat jade cup in his hand. However, there was something he didn't say. According to his understanding, this young man named Lin Sun should have died more than 10 years ago, but he miraculously survived. There were too many noteworthy points in this. The path of the strongest Tao. Chan Feng's pupils suddenly shrank, and his heart was shocked. He was really a little surprised. After all, in the ancient wilderness, there were not many geniuses who could set foot on such a path. But in such a barren mortal world, there was a young man who could achieve this step, which was really incredible. Qing Zhe, who was ignored by Lin Sun, chose to wait. From the beginning to the end, he didn't show any emotion. It seemed that he would wait until Lin Sun had to accept the challenge. This made the practitioners who paid attention to all this in the distance secretly shocked. They more and more realized that Qing Zhe's purpose and intention of challenging Lin Sun was absolutely not simple. At the same time, Lin Sun also knew Qing Zhe's attitude. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and said, "This guy's going to fight with me to the death. Boy, what on earth do you think? Don't you feel ashamed to be blocked in front of your house? Today's event has attracted the attention of the whole Forbidden City. If you let Qing Zhe block in front of your house, how can your Lin family keep a foothold in the Forbidden City in the future?" Before long, Zhao Tailai took the initiative to come to Lin Sun. As soon as they met, he directly asked Lin Sun how to solve this matter. Lin Sun was surprised and said, "Senior, according to your tone, you can't wait for me to fight with Qing Zhe?" Zhao Tailai chuckled and said, "If you're confident, then go ahead and fight. If you're not, then there's no harm in hiding. But then again, don't you want to know exactly what Qing Zhe is coming here for?" Lin Sun sneered and said, "In the end, you can't wait for me to go out and fight with him." Zhao Tailai said seriously, "I'm anxious for you. All the practitioners in the Forbidden City are looking forward to your appearance. You can suppress this guy's arrogance, so that he won't be arrogant and bully our empire. What's the benefit?" Lin Sun asked with a smile. Zhao Tailai stared at him and said, "I'm here to help you solve your problems, but you take the opportunity to blackmail me? Let me tell you, if you really don't want to accept the challenge, then I won't force you. However, if my niece, Jing Xian, were to find out that the man she fancied is hiding like a coward while she is serving the empire, guess how disappointed and heartbroken she would be?" Lin Sun suddenly got a headache. This old fox was too shameless. In order to let Lin Sun fight, he even used Zhao Jingshuan's name. Chapter 757. I felt like I didn't have enough words to apologize, but if I said too much, it would seem like I was trying to excuse myself, so I felt very conflicted. But no matter what, I saw everyone's comments, attacks, insults, disappointment, and so on. The only conclusion I could come to was that I was really ashamed. Really, I didn't dare to say how much change 17 years would bring, but at the very least, I would try my best to write even harder than last year and make up for all the missed updates. Chapter 758. Finally, Lin Sun agreed. Zhao Tailai had mentioned Zhao Jingxian. If he still didn't agree, it would be too cowardly and cowardly. What's more, Zhao Tailai was right. Being challenged by a successor of heaven-reaching sword sect, Lin Sun would be looked down upon by the world if he ignored him. In front of the gate of heart-cleansing peak, Qing Zhe was drinking and sipping tea by himself with a calm and indifferent look. That kind of motionless posture made him more extraordinary. In the distance, when Gu Dongting saw this scene, he twisted his beard and smiled with a touch of appreciation in his eyes. Gu Dongting was the elder of heaven-reaching sword sect who came to Xiao Empire this time. He was a real life-death realm master with unfathomable strength and extraordinary status. His appearance was clean and tidy. His beard and hair were like frost and snow, but his skin was as white as a baby's. With a horsetail whisk in his hand, he stood there casually, giving people a lofty momentum. This young friend Qing Zhe deserves to be a successor disciple of heaven-reaching sword sect. His temperament is leisurely and elegant. Next to him, a big shot sighed with emotion. Yes, an outstanding young man like Qing Zhe is like a rock in the sky. Only an ancient orthodoxy like heaven-reaching sword sect can cultivate such an outstanding talent. Voices of appreciation sounded one after another. Gu Dongting was accompanied by a group of bigwigs from Zhou family and Qin family. When there is no tiger in the mountain, the monkey is the king. Lin Sun thinks he could be the best among the young generation of the empire. Doesn't he know that in the eyes of the ancient desolation territory, he is just a frog in a well? Some bigwigs snorted and expressed their disdain for Lin's son. Speaking of which, there was no doubt that Zhua family and Qin family were the happiest about Cyan Ninja's challenge to Lin's son. In the past, because of Lin's son, the Zhua family and the Qin family were disgraced and had to swallow their anger. But now it was different. Qingzhe was a successor disciple of heaven-reaching sword sect. His cultivation was peerless. At the royal banquet a few days ago, he even suppressed a group of bigwigs. Under such circumstances, the bigwigs of Zhua family and Qin family hoped that Qingzhe could suppress Lin Sun's arrogance. It would be even better if Qingzhe could be disabled. Gu Dongting just listened, smiling without saying a word, appearing very reserved. "Look, Lin Sun is out." Suddenly, there was an exclamation in the distance, which attracted the attention of the whole audience. Looking over, they saw a handsome young man walking out of the gate of Heart-Cleansing Peak. It was Lin's son. The whole audience was shocked. Many people thought that Lin's son would not show up casually. After all, this challenge was too dangerous. Once he failed, it would be a great blow to Lin's prestige. That was why Lin Sun's appearance caused a sensation in the field. He's actually going to accept the challenge? Some practitioners were worried. The dreadfulness of Cyan had already spread throughout the Forbidden City. Even the big shots in Reincarnation Developing Realm couldn't resist his 3 strikes. How could Lin Sun be his match? That's good as well. Instead of being obstructed by others and enduring silently and aggrievedly, why don't we fight to our heart's content and let that Cyan taste the might of our empire's cultivators? Some people were excited and had blind confidence in Lin Sun. Lin Sun had too many brilliant achievements in the past. Since Lin Sun dared to show up, he must be confident. As for the clansmen of Zhua and Qin family, they all widened their eyes at the moment as if they couldn't believe it. But soon they were all excited. They couldn't wait to see Lin Sun's downfall. Lin Sun appeared. For a time, the outside world couldn't calm down. From the moment Cyan just sent out the letter of challenge, this duel caused a sensation in the whole Forbidden City and attracted the attention of many major forces. One was an inherited disciple of the heaven-reaching sword sect, who once suppressed a group of big shots in Reincarnation Developing Realm with 3 strikes. His fighting power was outstanding and peerless. The other was a young man of the Empire, who was known as the crown of the whole capital. He also had many dazzling halos. It was not hard to imagine how shocking the battle between the two would be if it were to happen. When Lin Sun appeared, Cyan was drinking. He was a little surprised that Lin Sun would show up so soon. After that, his expression recovered its composure, and he placed the wine cup in his hand on the table before standing up. It was just a simple action, but in an instant, the whole audience became silent, and all eyes were cast on him. Qingzhe's figure was tall, slender, and dignified. His brilliant silver hair carried a crystalline luster, and he could be said to be extremely handsome. His skin was white, and his eyes were like green gems. When he stood up, his entire body was like a javelin, majestic and terrifying. Even the practitioners who disliked Qingzhe had to admit that his appearance was too good. With one glance, they could tell that he was a proud son of heaven who was destined to shine. Some practitioners of the older generation looked solemn. Different from when he was sitting idle before, Cyan at this moment had a kind of restrained sharpness, which made people's hearts palpitate. Be careful. This guy's attainments in swordsmanship are extremely terrifying. Moreover, he is a direct descendant of the ancient green crane and has awakened a talent secret method. Zhao Tailai reminded Lin Sun from behind. Lin Sun nodded and walked down from the mountain gate. His black hair was long to his waist, and his skin was crystal like jade, flowing with brilliant luster. His pace was neither too fast nor too slow, and his figure was tall and elegant, with a sense of transcendence. This boy is not bad. In the distance, Gu Dongting was a little surprised. Although he is not bad, he is too arrogant and has a bad character. The bigwigs of the Zhua and Qin families were slightly uncomfortable. They didn't like Lin Sun at all. On the contrary, they all wanted Lin Sun to die quickly. Gu Dongting smiled and said, "I see. then we can take this opportunity to let Cyanja grind his arrogance and bones. That's the best. The bigwigs of his Zwa and Qin families were overjoyed. In the distance, Cyanja stared at Lin's son, who was standing 30 meters away, and said, "You show up at this time. Can't you keep calm?" His words were flat, and his expression was very calm. His eyes were cold and frightening, with a sense of condescension. "You're not the only one here. I can't let everyone wait too long, so as not to waste their time. As for you, you are not enough to affect my state of mind." Lin's son was also looking at Cyanja. Even he had to admit that, judging from his appearance and breath, this guy was indeed very unusual. Even Xiao Ran, Su Xingfeng of the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure, and the top saints in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea were slightly inferior to this guy. But this was normal. After all, this guy was in the reincarnation development realm, which had long surpassed the Tao Insight realm. Moreover, he was an inherited disciple of the heaven-reaching sword sect, so it was reasonable for him to have such an elegant demeanor. "I heard that you have set foot on the path of the strongest Tao. Today I come to see it. In order to be fair, I will suppress part of my strength, lest others laugh at me for bullying you." When Cyanja spoke, there seemed to be lightning flashing in his eyes, and there was a faint curve at the corner of his mouth. Under that calm appearance, there was an absolute disdain and conceit. This shocked the whole audience. Many practitioners looked uncertain. Suppressing his own strength to have a fair fight with Lin's son, Cyanja's move was undoubtedly very domineering, and it showed how much confidence he had. "Is that so? Before the fight, I am very curious. Are you not worried that you will be killed here today?" Lin's son asked. Arrogant, reckless. In the distance, the big shots of the Zwa and Qin families almost laughed out of anger. At this time, this guy was still as impetuous as before. Did he really think that Cyanja was so easy to deal with? You are right. This guy is indeed very arrogant. Even Gu Dongting frowned slightly, and his expression became somewhat cold. "It seems that you are very conceited, but excessive conceit is stupid, especially in front of me. You are not qualified to say such words." Cyanja seemed very calm. He looked at Lin's son with a scrutinizing gaze, and there was a kind of frightening aura spreading. His hair was crystal clear, silver, and overflowing with divine splendor. The chi and blood in his body roared, and it was so terrifying that it made the whole world tremble. His words were very contemptuous, which made the practitioners of the Empire angry. At the same time, they were a little worried. This Cyanja was too confident. Who wouldn't worry about Lin's son? In this case, why don't we make a bet? If you lose, you will answer 2 of my questions truthfully. What do you think? Lin's son smiled very calmly. Cyanja frowned, and his expression was still very calm, but his eyes became colder. He looked at Lin's son with an almost condescending attitude and said, "What if you lose? At your disposal." Lin's son said without hesitation. Hearing this, all the practitioners of the Empire were shocked. This was no different from signing a life and death contract. Wasn't Lin's son worried at all? Cyanja smiled, which was extremely rare, but his smile was very cold. "Originally, I didn't intend to kill you. But now, since you insist on seeking death, I will fulfill your wish." His words were also extremely domineering. It was a form of absolute arrogance and conceit. No matter who was his enemy, when they heard these words, they would probably feel very uncomfortable. But in the eyes of Gu Dongting, this was a matter of course. Cyanja had such confidence and capital. Lin's son smiled and said, "Then let's fight." Cyanja responded with an "oh." His whole body shone, and one could keenly perceive that his breath was a little weaker than before. Obviously, as he said, he disdained to bully Lin's son by relying on his cultivation, so he suppressed his own strength. Boom! The next moment, a great battle broke out. Cyanja strode out, his clothes fluttering and his long silver hair flying. His figure rushed out like a divine rainbow and disappeared in an instant. When he appeared again, he was already in front of Lin's son. His palms and fingers formed a handprint, surrounded by bright and sharp green clouds, and smashed at Lin's son. The air exploded, and the handprint forcibly crushed a vacuum mark, which was almost able to smash a mountain. Chapter 759. As soon as Cyanja made his move, his swift, decisive, and terrifying means shocked everyone present and many Imperial practitioners. Obviously, he wanted to suppress Lin Sun by force and trample him under his feet in a domineering manner. Lin Sun didn't dodge. He waved his right palm and used the Swanee seal to blast forward like a Swanee beast soaring into the sky. The momentum was equally shocking and caused the air to explode. Boom! It was as if the mountains were collapsing and the ground was cracking. The sound of the collision was like the rumbling of thunder from the ninth heaven. It shook everyone's eardrums and made their blood boil. The Imperial practitioners were extremely nervous and worried for Lin Sun. They were afraid that he wouldn't be able to block Cyanja's attack. After all, this guy was too terrifying. As for the clansmen of the Zhua and Qin clans, they wore smiles on their faces. They were relaxed and excited. They didn't think Lin Sun was a match for Cyanja because the disparity in strength was too great. Only Gu Dongting remained silent. He knew very well that if the young man had really set foot on the path of absolute cultivation, he wouldn't be suppressed so easily. On the battlefield, the divine radiance collapsed and shook violently. It was as if two volcanoes were colliding and emitting terrifying light waves. The aftermath of the collision was like a stormy sea that swept in all directions. The nearby rocks, roads, and vegetation were all destroyed in an instant. Smoke and dust filled the air. The two of them fought barehanded. One was tall and dignified, fierce and disdainful, like an unsheathed peerless sword. The other was ethereal, surrounded by brilliant radiance. They fought with each other, and the terrifying fluctuations were dazzling to the point that people couldn't open their eyes. In an instant, they had already fought dozens of times. The speed and strength were so terrifying that it caused the heaven and earth to fall into great turmoil. The wind and clouds changed color, and everything collapsed. The clansmen of the Zhua and Qin clans were stunned. Cyanja, who possessed peerless strength and whose attacks were so fierce and terrifying, was actually blocked. Moreover, it was in a head-on confrontation. Their hearts trembled and they felt incredulous. They opened their eyes wide, and the relaxed expression on their faces disappeared without a trace. The smiles on their faces also froze. Cyanja suppressed his own strength, which gave this kid a chance to breathe and turn around. Don't worry, his defeat has long been determined. It's only a matter of time. A noble of the Zhua clan comforted. Boom! The ground cracked and collapsed inch by inch. Dirt and gravel swept out like waves, and ear-piercing sounds of explosions could be heard in the air as divine radiance wreaked havoc in the void. This was a terrifying scene caused by the intense confrontation between the two of them. It was indeed too intense. At this moment, in front of the gate of Heart-Cleansing Peak, many practitioners of major forces gathered. The whole Forbidden City was paying attention to this battle. Originally, many practitioners of the Empire were still worried about Lin Sun and on tenterhooks. But soon, they were all shocked and attracted to this unprecedented duel. There was no doubt that this was a peerless battle at the peak of the world, and it was too rare and unprecedented. Bang! Not long after, the two of them separated from each other. However, very quickly, the two of them unleashed even more terrifying attacks. The blazing rain of divine radiance was like a raging storm that drowned the figures of the two of them. They moved swiftly and flickered, causing the spectators to be dazzled and practically forget to breathe. Even the big shots of the older generation couldn't help but be moved. It was hard to imagine how such two young people could have such terrible power. One was more abnormal than the other. As for some ordinary cultivators, they were completely dumbfounded and stunned on the spot. This kind of power was completely beyond their imagination. Every collision was enough to destroy the mountains, crack the sea, and collapse the universe. It was like the sun and the moon competing for brilliance. Humph! In the battlefield, Cyanja snorted coldly. His fierce attack was blocked, and he failed to defeat this opponent immediately which made him a little unhappy. Boom! Cyanja's momentum became more and more powerful. His whole body was like a big furnace, burning with divine radiance and soaring into the sky. His long silver hair was flying like a god, shining brightly. So strong, some practitioners of reincarnation developing realm all changed their faces. They felt the horror of Cyanja's power. Negative bump. Lin Sun's figure suddenly stretched out, and his back burst out with divine radiance like a big dragon, and a phantom of a negative bump emerged. This was the secret inheritance of the first transformation of the 9 changes of Calamity Dragon. Now that Lin Sun displayed it, its power became different from before. Negative bump swept across the sky, as if it was going to crash the world, and released a terrible aura of destruction. Bang! In an instant, everyone could clearly see that Cyanja's figure was hit, and he almost staggered and flew out. The whole audience was shocked. Even the calm Gu Dongting couldn't help but slightly squint at this moment. After this blow, Cyanja's eyes suddenly became cold. Silver danced wildly, and his whole body bloomed with green light like burning flames. Rumble! His power was skyrocketing, and the void around him collapsed inch by inch. The wind and clouds around him changed dramatically, and the sky was dyed green by the dense light. In the end, as he breathed, the world trembled, and the scene was very frightening. The clansmen of the Zhua family, the Qin family, and the practitioners of other empires were all a little frightened at this moment. They felt the horror of Cyanja. He was definitely a very terrible and outstanding figure of the young generation. At this time, Cyanja was indeed extremely dangerous. A pair of green pupils burst out a pair of frightening light beams. Whoosh! His figure flashed and disappeared. The next moment, he appeared in front of Lin Sun. Boom! His hands condensed into an ancient seal, surrounded by green electric arcs, as if thunder and lightning gathered in it. The terrible aura made even the practitioners of reincarnation developing realm feel numb. Lin Sun was not afraid. His aura became more and more ethereal, with a sense of perfection. The clear light around him was illusory, clear and clean. Even his hair was shining, and his black eyes were surging with frightening flames. If Cyanja didn't suppress his power, Lin Sun might be cautious. But he did, which made Lin Sun have no fear. Suppress, Cyanja whispered. His whole body was like a green sun, with a powerful and unparalleled fierce aura, and he rushed over. Lin Sun displayed the inheritance of the 9 changes of Calamity Dragon. Like a legendary divine dragon, he displayed all kinds of miraculous forms. Ice Dragon Steps, Bodhisattva Bump, Baxiao Block, and Swanee Seal were all at his fingertips. The two fought again, like swords and sabers, and also like the collision of ancient holy mountains. The terrible aftermath of the collision made many practitioners of the Empire change their faces frequently and avoid far away. Boom! There the world was in disorder. There was a big abyss-like pit, and the cracked ground spread like a broken cobweb. That scene was indeed too terrifying. In the nearby area, more and more practitioners of the Empire came to pay attention to the battle after hearing the news. In front of the gate of Heart-Cleansing Peak, Vulture, Young Ku, Lin Zhong, Zhu Laosan, and Lin Huayuan were also watching. In the dark, many big shots fixed their eyes on this place, paying close attention to every detail of this battle. At this time, everyone could see that it was difficult for Cyanja to defeat Lin Sun in a short time under the suppression of his own realm. Lin Sun's amazing performance also refreshed many practitioners of the Empire's cognition of him, so they were surprised and surprised. Indeed, most people did not expect that after half a year of silence, Lin Sun's strength had become more and more unfathomable. This is the power of the peerless Tao, Gu Dongting murmured to himself. Looking at the big shots of the Zhua family and the Qin family next to him, they were all surprised and doubtful. Puff! After a while, there was a sudden burst of blood in the field, which was extremely eye-catching. At the same time, A figure staggered back more than 30 meters in the void, with blood spilling from the corner of his mouth. The whole audience was shocked because it was not Lin Sun who was defeated, but Cyanja. This result stunned many people. They couldn't believe it. It was too unexpected and caused too great an impact. And the big shots of the Zhua family and the Qin family were even more shocked. How could this be possible? They also didn't expect such a scene. Before, many people were worried about Lin Sun and almost didn't think he had a chance to win. After all, Cyanja was too strong. Even a practitioner at the full completion of reincarnation developing realm couldn't resist his 3 swords. But now, he was the first to be injured in the duel and defeated by Lin Sun, who only had the cultivation of Tao Insight Realm. This reversal was indeed a little too sudden. I'm afraid it's not possible to suppress the realm. Gu Dongting frowned. In the battlefield, Lin Sun's black hair fluttered, and his whole body was surrounded by illusory, clear light. He stood there unscathed like an immortal. He glanced at Cyanja and said, "Use all your strength, otherwise you will only lose more miserably." There was a dead silence in the field. In the distance, Cyanja gently wiped the blood stains from the corner of his mouth. His face was a little pale. On his left shoulder, there was a collapsed fist mark with blood flowing out, which was shocking. Such a scene shocked everyone. Earlier, Cyanja's arrogance made many practitioners think that Lin Sun would be in a disadvantageous position in this duel and might be defeated. But as the battle began and the two fiercely fought, Lin Sun's amazing performance shocked everyone. Until now, the scene of Cyanja being injured made everyone feel like they were in a dream. This is a true disciple of Heavenly Sword Sect, a real talent. How could he be the first to be injured? The big shots of the Zhua and Qin families were very sad and unwilling to believe this fact. He suppressed his realm and didn't use all his strength. And don't forget that Cyanja's strongest skill is swordsmanship. Until now, he has never used this kind of power. Watch patiently. The one who will lose in the end will definitely not be Cyanja. Gu Dongting's words made the big shots of the Zhua and Qin families feel refreshed and refreshed. In fact, Gu Dongting's words were not false. He knew Cyanja very well. This successor had the strength to match his pride. He could be called an outstanding talent in Heavenly Sword Sect, and his performance was extremely good. His previous injury could only be attributed to carelessness. Gu Dongting was very sure that when Cyanja really began to get serious, all this was bound to be reversed and changed. Chapter 760. He's too strong. These days, the rumor about Cyanja made all the imperial practitioners feel depressed. A young disciple of a sect had suppressed all the big shots of the empire at the banquet of the royal family. Who could feel happy about this? Now, seeing Lin Sun's great power and being the first to injure Cyanja in a head-on confrontation, the imperial practitioners were naturally excited. However, the cheers and excitement didn't last long. The atmosphere became deathly silent and tense again. The reason was that Qingzhe's aura had changed once more. He was like a primeval, ferocious beast that had been jolted awake from its slumber, and a shapeless and terrifying aura swept out from his body, causing all the cultivators from the empire to feel cold while they felt an indescribable pressure. At this moment, Cyanja's whole body seemed to be burning with blue divine flames. His silver long hair fluttered in the wind like a waterfall of the Milky Way, and his eyes shot out a terrifying divine light. If the Qingzhe from before was like a peerless blade, then at this moment, he was like a seething volcano that contained a terrifying aura capable of obliterating the heavens and the earth, and he was on the verge of exploding. It could be clearly seen that the collapsed and injured part of his left shoulder was instantly restored to its original state, without a trace of injury to be found. Not only that, Cyanja stood there casually at this moment, making the world tremble. He was much stronger than before. Oh no, all the top big shots of the empire changed their faces. Obviously, Cyanja was angry and no longer suppressed his power. I've already experienced the power of the absolute Tao. It's really extraordinary that you can make me suffer a little injury. Cyanja's voice was calm, but his power was more terrible. His eyes were shining, bursting with divine light. "But do you really think you can defeat me like this?" As he spoke, he took a step forward, and the void collapsed and wailed. The destructive power made all the top figures of reincarnation developing realm tremble. Too strong. This might be the real power that Cyanja possessed. Before, he suppressed his realm, so he was injured because of carelessness. But now it was destined to be different. Good. A big shot of his family was so excited that he couldn't help shouting. Immediately, he received angry stares from the Imperial practitioners. The big shot of his family knew he had lost his composure and immediately shut his mouth. However, he was sneering in his heart. He was looking forward to the upcoming battle. Facing Cyanja, who had become more powerful, Lin Sun also took a step forward. He didn't retreat. His posture was elegant, ethereal, and the aura around him had a sense of perfection. "I just don't understand. Previously, you even said that you would suppress your cultivation level and fight me fairly. Now that you see that the situation is not good, you go back on your word. Could it be that your Heavenly Sword sect has gone back on your word?" Lin Sun's words were very casual, but there was a hint of sarcasm in them, which made all the practitioners of the Empire want to laugh, but they couldn't. But this was indeed the case. Previously, Qingzhe had arrogantly expressed that he would suppress his realm and fight fairly with Lin Sun. But now he suddenly changed his mind. This behavior was indeed shameful. Impudent. In the distance, Gu Dongting's eyes turned cold. He didn't expect that Lin Sun would take this opportunity to slander their Heavenly Sword sect. But Qingzhe's face darkened, and his eyes became extremely terrifying. He stared at Lin Sun and said, "I was polite to you before, but you didn't appreciate it. Instead, you ridiculed me. It seems that you really want to die." His heart was full of killing intent. He had lost face when he was injured before, and now he was ridiculed by Lin Sun in public, which made him completely angry. Boom! In Qingzhe's eyes, a pair of mysterious sword-shaped patterns burst out, crisscrossing in the void and releasing a sharp and peerless aura of Sword Tao. On the Imperial side, all the practitioners gasped in horror, realizing that Qingzhe was going to use his strongest means of Sword Tao. At the royal banquet, Qingzhe had suppressed all the big shots with his cultivation of Sword Tao. No one could stop his 3 swords. Even the great practitioners at the reincarnation development realm couldn't. This guy is not much inferior to Yun Qingbai at that time. Zhao Tailai's pupils suddenly shrank in the distance. At this moment, Gu Dongting and the big shots of the Zhua and Qin families became calm. Qingzhe was about to use his full strength, which made them no longer worried. Like them, Lin Sun also looked very calm. Although Qingzhe's aura made him feel a kind of pressure, it was not enough to make him afraid. In the end, it's all because of you. Today, I finally understand the ability of the successor of the Heavenly Sword sect, Lin Sun sneered. These words stimulated Qingzhe, making his face more calm and cold, and his aura more terrifying. When had a successor disciple of the Heavenly Sword sect been ridiculed like this? But now, in such a barren place like the mortal world, he was repeatedly ridiculed by a young man of Tao Insight Realm, which made Qingzhe extremely angry. Chop! He lightly spat out a word, and his killing intent soared into the sky. In the next moment, a dazzling green sword-shaped symbol suddenly shot out from his pupils. Whoosh! The sword-shaped symbol flashed like a vigorous cyan lightning, showing its peerless sharpness, which made the eyes of many practitioners of the Empire sting, as if they were cut by a sword. Daybreak! Some big shots of the Empire exclaimed and recognized this strike. At the royal banquet, Qingzhe once displayed this kind of swordsmanship inheritance. Under this sword, like the rising sun, the light was peerless, collapsing the darkness. But this time, the sword of daybreak was obviously more terrible. It was condensed by invisible sword intent and controlled by the spirit, which was mysterious and unparalleled. Spirit. It was the spiritual power that could only be condensed by the strong practitioners of reincarnation development realm. There is no doubt that the swordsmanship inheritance mastered by Qingzhe had involved the magical use of the spirit power. Such swordsmanship was rare and peerless in the whole empire. This strike undoubtedly reflected how terrible Qing's foundation was. However, no one noticed that when Lin Sun saw this strike, a strange light flashed in his eyes. Whoosh! In the next moment, a sharp blade like starlight swept out from between Lin Sun's eyebrows. It was as white as snow and almost transparent, like a cold flowing light, like a dream. Wordless inheritance of Dao pattern array diagram. This was the first inheritance of Duan Run, the real secret method of controlling spirit. Different from Qing's, what Lin Sun used was a real magic weapon. It was a magic weapon. It was a treasure controlled by spirit. It could kill ghosts and gods, break the universe, and disturb yin and yang. Such a treasure was rarely seen in the world today. It was so rare that even the old monsters of life-death realm might not have it. Puff! Under the gaze of everyone present, the moment the broken blade swept out, the peerless secret sword that Qing had slashed out was easily cut apart like a piece of paper, exploding into a rain of light that scattered everywhere. The might of this sword strike was extremely shocking, yet before it could even reveal its might, it was destroyed just like that. In an instant, everyone was struck dumb, and they stood there in a daze, not daring to believe what they were seeing. Puff! In the distance, Qing wanted to kill Lin Sun with absolute force to vent his hatred. But now, like a kite with a broken string, he flew out horizontally, coughing up blood, and his face turned pale in an instant. With a bang, Qing's body fell to the ground, cracking it and sending smoke and dust into the sky. All the people present were dumbfounded. After Qing stopped suppressing his power, the horrible power had already shocked everyone's heart, and they were secretly worried about Lin Sun. After all, even the top figures of reincarnation developing realm couldn't resist 3 swords of Qing. Under such circumstances, could Lin Sun, who was only a Tao Insight realm, win? However, the result left everyone stupefied. Xianja slashed out with his sword, but it was defeated even more miserably than before. This scene was too inconceivable. Oh my God, we were purely worried for young Master Lin. The practitioners who had blind confidence in Lin Sun were a little dumbfounded at this moment. Lin Sun was so powerful that he easily defeated the enemy, as if he was dealing with chickens and dogs. His means were too fierce and domineering. Impossible. The big shots of the Zhou family and the Qin family were so shocked that they almost jumped up. They were full of confidence and ready to watch a good show. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, it was Qing who was defeated? Fortunately, they had learned their lesson last time and didn't dare to make sound. Otherwise, if the practitioners of other empires knew what they thought, they would be despised and despised. It's a magic weapon. It's a magic weapon. Gu Dongting's eyes twinkled. He was also a little moved and shocked. His eyes were fixed on the white blade around Lin Sun, and his expression changed. Only he knew that Qing's defeat was not unjust, because it was a real magic weapon. Even in the Heavenly Sword Sect, such a treasure could be said to be extremely precious and rare. But the result was too depressing after all. Ha ha ha! Zhao Tailai in the distance laughed like an old fox who had stolen a chicken. In front of the gate of Heart-Cleansing Peak, a group of senior officials and clansmen of Lin family cheered and felt honored. I'm going to kill you. In the field, Qing climbed up from the ground and roared coldly. He was unwilling and furious. He couldn't accept this result. It was a great shame for him to be seriously injured before he used all his strength. Chop! At this moment, Qing no longer had the previous leisurely posture. His silver sword danced wildly, and his face was livid. His figure was like a burning volcano, cracking the earth and burning the void. He took out a cyan spiritual sword and attacked Lin Sun. At this time, he was like a cyan sun bursting with divine flame. He couldn't wait to kill Lin Sun with one blow. However, Lin Sun had no fear for a long time. If Qing didn't use such a secret method before, Lin Sun might have to spend a lot of effort to deal with him. But now, Chapter 761. You've been defeated. It's futile to struggle. Lin Sun said. Then the broken blade turned into a white and transparent flowing rainbow. With a clear sound, it swept out in an ethereal and magical manner. It was also the method of spirit control, but Lin Sun used a divine weapon with his spirit, while Qing Jiu used a secret sword condensed by his spirit. This was the fundamental difference between the two, so the power was totally different. Obviously, Qing Jiu also noticed this, so he took out a cyan spiritual sword this time. Whoosh! The battle broke out again. Like a rainbow, Broken Blade was ethereal and transparent. It easily resolved the opponent's attack. Roar! At the same time, Lin Sun used Paleo Roar. The earth-shattering sound waves turned into visible waves and spread out, shattering the void and flooding all directions. Qing Jiu, who was in the fierce battle, suddenly groaned and trembled all over. Despicable! His eyes were terrible and full of anger. His spirit was hurt by the broken blade before, and now his spirit was impacted by the terrible sound waves. He couldn't bear it at once. Despicable? This is a battle. You are an inherited disciple of Heavenly Master Swordsmanship sect. Do you still need me to teach you? Lin Sun used Ice Dragon Steps to launch a strong attack as he spoke. He wanted to suppress his opponent. This time, he didn't hold back at all. He wanted to defeat his opponent at one go and end this battle. Boom! The shadow of Ice Dragon soared into the sky, white and crystal. Lin Sun's speed had reached an appalling level. He flew backward with his black eyes as deep as the abyss. At this moment, he completely showed his power. His peerless posture shocked all the people present. Qing Jiu was furious. He didn't avoid but fought with Lin Sun directly. Rumble! The void seemed to be blown up. The broken blade danced wildly. The sword edge flowed, and the surging light spread out like a flood, sweeping in all directions. The practitioners who paid attention to this battle were stunned. Qing Jiu was so powerful before, but he was suppressed by Lin Sun at this moment. He could hardly raise his head. The faces of the bigwigs of Zhua and Qin families had become extremely gloomy. This result was hard for them to accept. The more dazzling Lin Sun's performance was, the more indignant and depressed they felt, as if they had eaten a dead fly. Bang, bang, bang. Qing Jiu felt that his blood and qi were boiling. His hands and feet were numb, and his soul was shaking. There was an indescribable anger and grievance in his heart. How was this possible? He couldn't believe it. He had already stepped into the ranks of the strongest in the wheel-developing realm. His combat strength was outstanding and stunning. Even among the younger generation in the ancient wilderness, he could be considered a genius. Even the average complete wheel-developing realm experts were not worthy of his attention. But now he was being suppressed, and it was being suppressed by Grotto Heaven realm youth. Qing Jiu's temperament had always been tough. However, at this moment, he felt extremely humiliated and uncomfortable. If he was defeated in this barren lower bound, and the news spread back to his sect, he would definitely become a laughingstock. Crack! It didn't take long for Lin Sun to cut off Green Insect's spiritual sword with his broken blade, making a sharp sound. At the same time, Lin Sun stepped out and pressed his palm down. A swan and eye seal condensed and released infinite light, which rumbled on Qing Jiu. Bang! Qing Jiu was sent flying. His chest caved in and blood gushed out. There was an uproar in the field. Qing Jiu was suppressed, which made the practitioners of the Empire feel that they were dreaming. But at the same time, Lin Sun's strong combat strength also made the practitioners of the Empire excited and surprised. Indeed, who could imagine that a Grotto Heaven realm youth could suppress an inherited disciple from the Heavenly Master Swordsmanship sect to such an extent? This inherited disciple once swept away a group of bigwigs in the wheel-developing realm within 3 moves. In such a contrast, Lin Sun's incredible strength was even more apparent. How dare the successor of the Heavenly Master Swordsmanship sect show off in our empire? Look, he was suppressed by Child Lin. This is the result of looking down on people in the world. Cool, it's really cool. Child Lin deserves to be the leader of the younger generation in the empire. How can his reputation be undeserved? Hearing that Qing Zhe was unscrupulously criticized, Gu Dongting in the distance became gloomy and emitted an overwhelming aura. He even couldn't help but want to take action several times. Qing Zhe was in such a disadvantageous position, which made him lose face. However, Gu Dongting soon became alert. He perceived that there was an extremely terrible power pervading this world. As long as he dared to make a move, there would be a peerless duel between the kings. It's him. Gu Dongting locked on his opponent in an instant. It was Zhao Tailai. This made his eyes surge, but he finally restrained himself. After all, this empire was not the territory of the Heavenly Master Swordsmanship sect. Although Gu Dongting was conceited, he knew that he would encounter many obstacles if he acted recklessly. At this time, Qing Zhe was completely suppressed in the battlefield. Like a scarecrow caught in a storm, he suffered many injuries. He was bleeding all over, his hair was disheveled, and his bones were broken in many places. Master, Qing Zhe's servant, Chun Feng, shouted anxiously with a gloomy face. This servant used to be very conceited and regarded the practitioners of the empire as nothing. But now he was scared out of his wits and panicked, which made some practitioners of the empire laugh at him. Bang! Not long after, Qing Zhe was suppressed. His body crashed to the ground, making a big pit. His face was covered with dust, and his hair was disheveled. He looked miserable. His eyes were about to pop out. He couldn't accept this result. He stood up with a roar. But in an instant, his body was stiff, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Because a transparent, broken blade like white ice and snow was already at his throat. As long as he dared to move a little, his neck would be cut off. Defeated, Qing Zhe felt like the sky was falling down. His face was gloomy, twisted, and ferocious. He was so angry that he almost spat blood. Didn't you say the child Lin was weak? Why are you defeated? The practitioners of the empire laughed at him. This made Qing Zhe extremely angry and ashamed. His face was burning. He was the successor of the Heavenly Master Swordsmanship sect, the outstanding talent of the generation. He was extremely confident and conceited. After he came to the mortal world, he didn't put any peers in his eyes. But now, he was suppressed and defeated under the eyes of thousands of people. This blow was so heavy that Qing Zhe couldn't accept it for a while. According to the previous agreement, I will let you go immediately if you answer my 2 questions truthfully. Lin Sun landed on the ground and stared at Qing Zhe with his deep black eyes. To be honest, if Qing Zhe hadn't used the method of spirit attack in the previous battle, Lin Sun couldn't have suppressed him so quickly. After all, Qing Zhe was really powerful. He was definitely the most powerful talent that Lin Sun had ever met. However, it didn't make much sense to talk about this now. In everyone's eyes, the process was not important. What mattered was only the result. This was the reality. Qing Zhe was not prepared to be a loser at all. So when he heard Lin Sun's words, he felt more upset and resentful in his heart. Lin Sun didn't care about his mood and asked directly, "Tell me, did Yin Qingbai ask you to take the initiative to challenge me?" Qing Zhe's pupils shrank, and his expression changed. Just as he was about to say something, Lin Sun said, "No need to answer. I already know the answer. Second question, did Yin Qingbai ask you to kill me in this duel?" This time, Qing Zhe answered straightforwardly and snorted, "Who do you think you are? Do you deserve Senior Brother Yun's attention?" "No." Lin Sun frowned. "Senior Brother Yun is upright and upright. If he wants to kill you, he doesn't need to use my hands," Qing Zhe said coldly. Lin Sun stared at Qing Zhe for a while and finally determined that this guy should not be lying. But he was a little puzzled. Since Yin Qingbai asked Qing Zhe to challenge him, why didn't he give an order to kill him? Could it be that Yin Qingbai had other motives? "Go away." Lin Sun turned around and left, ignoring Qing Zhe. He was just a poor guy who worked for Yin Qingbai. His attitude of disregard was like a sharp blade deeply inserted into Qing Zhe's heart, making him feel an unprecedented sense of shame and anger. "Lin Sun," Qing Zhe roared like a beast. "Sooner or later, I will settle this account with you." Lin Sun still ignored him. It was just a loser's unreconciled words of revenge. At this moment, it was undoubtedly ridiculous and had no deterrent effect. Qing Zhi was trembling with anger. He was an inherited disciple of the heavenly master swordsmanship sect. With the power of 3 moves, he suppressed a group of bigwigs in the reincarnation developing realm. But now, after being defeated by a young man in the Tao Insight realm, he was directly ignored. This shame almost drove Qing Zhi crazy. Let's go. In the distance, Gu Dongting couldn't stand it anymore. He flew to the field and took Qing Zhi away. This battle had attracted a lot of attention. Qing Zhi had been ridiculed in this battle. If he continued to make trouble, he would lose a lot of face. Even Gu Dongting felt disgraced at this moment and didn't want to stay a moment longer. Awesome! Ha ha ha! In the field, there was a burst of earth-shaking cheers and laughter. They felt very happy. Even the powerful Qing Zhi was suppressed by Lin Sun, which made the practitioners of the empire feel proud and excited. This was Lin Sun, the young talent who covered the whole capital. The bigwigs of the Zhou clan and the Qin clan were completely dumbfounded. How could they have thought that the final result would be like this? At this time, Lin Sun had returned to Heart-Cleansing Peak and was surrounded by a group of senior members of the Lin clan. Outside Heart-Cleansing Peak, there was still a lot of noise and excitement. The practitioners of the empire couldn't restrain their excitement and talked eagerly. Qing Zhi is really naive. If he knows that Lin Sun has killed several half-step kings in half a year in the bloodthirsty battlefield, I don't know whether he will regret today's duel. Some bigwigs from the imperial clan were gloating. This result was within their expectation. This battle is destined to cause a sensation in the Forbidden City and make the world tremble. After this battle, only the real top figures in the ancient wilderness can compete with Lin Sun. Many bigwigs made such a prediction. Chapter 762. When are you going to the ancient wilderness? On the top of Heart-Cleansing Peak, Zhao Tailai followed Lin Sun as soon as he returned. Lin Sun was stunned. Why do you suddenly ask this question? Zhao Tailai said, the signs of the catastrophe of the Great Way have begun to appear. The passage from the empire to the ancient wilderness has begun to become unstable. If you want to take action, try to hurry up. According to the old priest on the observatory, there will be a great change in the so-called lower world in half a year at most. At that time, it will be too late to leave. Lin Sun was shocked. So, even if I can leave safely, it's impossible for me to come back in the future. Zhao Tailai smiled. Who can tell what will happen in the future? Even the sages can't completely deduce the changes of the catastrophe of the Great Way. No one dares to say anything about what will happen in the future. I'll pay attention to it. Lin Sun pondered. He originally planned to hone all his strength to the perfect level in the bloodthirsty battlefield, but things didn't go as he wished. Up to now, he still had some shortcomings. For example, he hadn't completely mastered the last 3 changes of the 9 changes of Calamity Dragon. For example, he was still at the perfect level of Taoist connotation in the realm of the Great Way. It still took some effort to break through the realm of Taoist connotation. Moreover, the comprehension of the Great Way required opportunities and comprehension, which couldn't be mastered by hard work. When you decide when to leave, I will take you to see the Emperor. He will see you off in person. As soon as Zhao Tailai's words came out, Lin Sun was shocked. He realized that Zhao Tailai must have been entrusted by the Emperor behind the scenes. Okay, Lin Sun nodded and agreed. Before long, Zhao Tailai left in a hurry. This old fox was always in a hurry, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Lin Sun had long been used to it. At this moment, he was standing on the top of Heart-Cleansing Peak with his hands on his back, looking at the sea of clouds in the distance. The mountain breeze blew, making his clothes and long hair flutter. Lin Sun had just experienced a great battle, so he didn't have any feelings about it. He just thought of some past events. It was on this heart-cleansing peak that Yun Qingbai killed a group of direct descendants of Lin family. Today, a disciple from the Heavenly Sword Sect had a duel with him at the behest of Yun Qingbai. Without a doubt, Yun Qingbai already knew of his existence. Lin Sun was not worried about anything. Zhao Tailai had already promised that even if Yun Qingbai came to Xiao Empire again, he would never let the bloody thing happen again. What puzzled Lin Sun was that since Qing Ji didn't intend to kill him in the duel, what did Yun Qingbai want to do? Perhaps, when I enter the ancient desolation region and personally understand this enemy that I've never met, I might be able to find out the answer, Lin Sun murmured. The setting sun dyed the sea of clouds red. The mountain wind brought with it a thick, humid air, bringing with it a bone-piercing chill. Lin Sun stood there silently for a long time and finally turned away. He had already made up his mind to start preparing for his trip to the ancient desolation realm. Empire, Qingyuan Palace. This was the resting place that the imperial family had specially arranged for the heavenly master sword sect. Elder, I can conclude that there must be some kind of change in this boy that is comparable to defying the natural order and changing fate. Otherwise, a baby who should have died back then couldn't have achieved what he has today. In the room, Qing's expression was cold, and there was a haze between his eyebrows. His words were resolute, but there was resentment and unwillingness in them. Is this the thing that Qingbai asked you to test? Beside him, Gu Dongting was thoughtful. Qingji nodded, but his expression was still gloomy. Today, he was suppressed by Lin Sun in front of thousands of people. Thinking of it now, he was still mad with hatred. Defying the natural order and changing fate? Gu Dongting frowned, seemingly puzzled. A baby who has lost its spiritual vein is destined to die prematurely. Even if there are miraculous elixirs in this world that can save it, it will only become a cripple. It will never be able to embark on the path of cultivation again. And this child, how did he do it? Qing just snorted, Elder, do you think I'm lying? You saw the previous battle. This kid was able to defeat me with his grotto heaven stage cultivation. I'm afraid there aren't many people in the ancient desolation region who can achieve this. Admitting that the opponent was too weak undoubtedly proved that he was more weak. Qingji didn't want Gu Dongting to have other ideas. You misunderstood me. Gu Dongting shook his head, and divine light surged in his eyes. If this boy is really the baby, then, as you have guessed, there must be some kind of change in this boy that can defy the natural order and change fate. Speaking of this, he hesitated for a moment and said, I even suspect that he has regenerated a new spiritual vein. Clang! Qingzhe's hand trembled, and the teacup that he had just raised fell to the ground. But he seemed to be unaware of it. His eyes burst out with a terrible cyan luster, and he said, It must be so. The devouring abyss is the most mysterious talent in ancient times. Senior Brother Yun has embarked on the complete Ju's Tao with this talent. After a pause, he took a deep breath and said, And now this boy has also embarked on the Ju's Tao. This is definitely not a coincidence. Obviously, Gu Dongting had also guessed this point, and his expression became subtle. What Yun Qingbai did in the Xiao Empire was somewhat disgraceful, and very few people in the Heavenly Master Sword sect knew about it. But this didn't include Gu Dongting and Qingzhe. Conversely, both of them were clearly aware that Yun Qingbai's current accomplishments in the ancient desolation region were closely related to the quintessence spirit vein he'd obtained all those years ago. It was true that Yun Qingbai was an extremely talented cultivator with an extremely good foundation. He could be said to be a natural-born genius. However, if not for that piece of origin spirit vein, it would have been impossible for him to step onto the strongest path that others yearn for even in their dreams so quickly. Elder, I have a presumptuous request. Suddenly, Qingzhe stood up and knelt down in front of Gu Dongting. Gu Dongting narrowed his eyes and seemed to have guessed something. You don't want to? Qingzhe's eyes were full of firmness and longing. Elder, it won't take many years before the World War comes. At that time, all the talents in the world will rise together, and all the heroes will compete for the great fortune of becoming a saint or ancestor. It will definitely be an unprecedented age. I don't want to be left behind. Gu Dongting was silent for a moment and said, I'm afraid I can't help you with this matter. In the Xiao Empire, even if I want to help, I can't. Qingzhe hurriedly said, Of course, now is not the right time. But as far as I know, Lin Sun will go to the ancient wilderness sooner or later. At that time, I will have a lot of opportunities to do this. Gu Dongting still shook his head. I'm afraid this is not the right thing to do. Do you know how much Qingbai paid to integrate with that spiritual vein of origin? What's more, Lin's son is grown up now. Even if you get him, I'm afraid it's very difficult to seize his talent and make it your own. Qing just still looked firm and said, Elder, you don't need to worry about this. It's enough as long as you promise me one thing. What is it? Taking a deep breath, Qing gritted his teeth and said, hide the news about Lin's son. Especially don't mention it to senior fellow apprentice Yin. Gu Dongting was silent at once. The atmosphere in the room also froze for a moment. Elder, we Green Crane Branch will never forget your great kindness this time, and we will repay you greatly in the future. Qing just suddenly said, I heard that you are about to face the test of 9 tribulations of longevity. If you don't mind, you can go to the dwelling place of Green Crane Branch to undergo the tribulation. I believe that if my father knows this, he will be willing to lend the holy land of Green Crane Branch to you. Gu Dongting's eyes flickered imperceptibly and finally sighed softly. Well, considering your firm heart to pursue Taoism, I promise you this time that it won't happen again. Qingzhe immediately kowtowed and said, Thank you for your kindness, Elder. When are you going to do it? Gu Dongting couldn't help but ask. Don't worry. At least wait until he arrives at the ancient wilderness. Qingzhe smiled slightly, and his eyes were full of confidence. In the ancient wilderness, with the power of Green Crane Branch, it was easy to deal with a real king, let alone Lin's son. Gu Dongting suddenly said, Oh, there should be a magic weapon in his hand. Alas, if I had such a treasure years ago, I'm afraid I would have embarked on the road of 9 tribulations of longevity. Qingzhe immediately understood and said, Elder, you don't have to regret. Why capture him? I will give you the magic weapon. Gu Dongting suddenly laughed and helped Qingzhe up, who was kneeling on the ground. I'm very happy that you have such thoughts. Qingzhe also laughed, but he felt a little heartache in his heart. He secretly cursed Gu Dongting for being too greedy. He not only wanted to borrow the treasure of Green Crane Clan to pass the tribulation, but also wanted to swallow the magic weapon. But soon, Qingzhe didn't care about this. If he could embark on the same road as Yun Qingbai, what was the cost? Lin's son, don't die. I will wait for you in the ancient wilderness. Qingzhe murmured in his heart. But Qingzhe didn't know that his concealment helped Lin's son to avoid a fatal disaster by accident. Qingzhe, the successor of Heavenly Master Swordsmanship sect, was defeated by Lin's son. Today, the Forbidden City was in a great sensation because of this news. There was an uproar everywhere, and the atmosphere was extremely noisy. After half a year of silence, Lin's son once again amazed the world, which shocked all the forces in the Forbidden City and made them completely unable to sit still. Some forces who had old grudges with Lin family were worried about this and felt very uneasy. Lin's son grew up too fast and was too horrible. He was no longer the weak young man he used to be. Now he had great deterrent and threatening power. Some forces who made friends with Lin family secretly rejoiced that they had made the right choice. As long as Lin's son went further on the road of Taoism in the future, it would bring many benefits to these forces imperceptibly. On the same night, the deeds of Lin's son in the bloodthirsty battlefield under the name of Lin 12 spread rapidly in the night. Chapter 763. The Forbidden City was brightly lit at night. Qin family. It was rare for the big shots of Qin family and Zhuo family to gather together. However, compared with the noisy and lively atmosphere outside, the atmosphere in this hall was very depressed. These big shots' faces were gloomy, which made the air stagnant. Damn it, even the successor of heaven-reaching sword sect can't suppress him. Who in the Empire can do anything to him in the future? A big shot gnashed his teeth with resentment. It can be foreseen that with the protection of the big shots of the Empire and the favor of the current Emperor and the bloodthirsty King, if there is any trouble in heart-cleansing Peak, even if it is not done by our two families, they will definitely suspect us. Some people expressed pessimism and sighed. All the big shots of Qin family and Zhou family knew very well that they had done some unfavorable things to Lin family of heart-cleansing Peak more than 10 years ago. However, they didn't expect that Lin family, which had been declining for a long time, suddenly had a new vitality because of Lin's son. In just a few years, Lin family of heart-cleansing Peak had changed its appearance and risen strongly. In terms of momentum, some middle-level forces were overshadowed. Especially today, when Lin Sun defeated Qing Zhe, the big shots of Qin family and Zhou family realized a serious problem. There is almost no hope to contain and suppress Lin family in the future. Lin Sun, a big shot, gnashed his teeth with hatred. He was just a young man, but he supported Lin family alone in just a few years. The more he did this, the more threatening and hateful he was. Don't panic. Our two families can stand to this day, which is not something a young man can challenge. On the main seat, the leader of Qin family took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Although we can't do anything to him for the time being, he can't do anything to us either." After a pause, he continued, "I'm sure all of you are aware that this kid has become an enemy of the Heavenly Sword sect since he was born. It can be foreseen that he will definitely enter the ancient desolation territory in the future to avenge his parents. At that time, there's no need for us to worry at all. Just the Heavenly Sword sect alone will be enough to make it difficult for this kid to even take a step forward, and he might even die." This analysis was very practical, and it obtained the agreement of many great figures present here, causing them to feel much more at ease. Indeed, no matter how powerful Lin Sun was, he couldn't shake the two top aristocratic families at all with his current strength. In addition, he had many enemies. As long as he entered the ancient desolation territory, he was bound to be suppressed by Heaven-Reaching Sword sect. Heaven-Reaching Sword sect was an ancient orthodoxy that had been standing since ancient times. Its foundation was so strong that it was almost unimaginable. It was easy for them to kill a young man. I suddenly recalled that he once killed the successor of the Lingbao Holy Land in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea. That's why he became the Lingbao Holy Land's enemy. Suddenly, someone said, "The foundation and power of the numinous treasure Holy Land is no less than the Heavenly Sword sect." I also remember that half a year ago, a master of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land visited Green Deer School, and Lin Sun acted violently at that time and injured several successors of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land. All of a sudden, some big shots began to analyze the forces Lin Sun had made in the past. The more they talked, the more excited and relaxed they became. The resentment accumulated in their hearts was also swept away. In the end, they came to a conclusion that Lin Sun had made too many enemies. There would be plenty of people to deal with him in the future. In Xiao Empire, Lin Sun and Lin family of heart-cleansing Peak couldn't shake the Zhou and Qin families at all. This also meant that Lin Sun's threat, at least for now, was nothing at all. I truly wish for nothing more than for this kid to leave the Empire and head to the ancient desolation region. There are sects in great numbers there, a myriad of clans coexisting there, and the experts there are numerous like carps in a river. It's a vast and magnificent place. With that kid's ability and having offended so many ancient sects, he probably wouldn't even know how he died. I'm looking forward to it as well. This kid has been running amok since the beginning. He's extremely daring and has caused so much trouble. He's definitely a restless person. If he goes to the ancient desolation domain, who knows how many people he'll offend. The atmosphere in the hall became more relaxed. They were all gloating. Report. Suddenly, a servant of Zhou family rushed in from outside the hall. Sweating profusely, he reported in a panic, "Patriarch, I just got the news that Lin Sun has been silent for half a year. It turns out that he went to the bloodthirsty battlefield to kill people." All the great figures in the surroundings were stunned and bewildered. What's it to make a fuss about? Be specific. The patriarch of Qin family said in a deep voice. The servant wiped his sweat and said quickly, "Just now, it said in the Forbidden City that Lin Sun killed several half-step king beings in the bloodthirsty battlefield alone." The servant began to describe Lin Sun's brilliant achievements in the bloodthirsty battlefield. During this entire process, the expressions of the great figures of the Zhua and Qin clans had become gloomy once more, and the relaxed and delighted expressions they'd obtained with great difficulty had vanished without a trace. Especially according to the news, it's Lin Sun's great contribution that the soldiers in the bloodthirsty battlefield could hold on until the passage to the Empire was opened. When a servant said this, the atmosphere in the hall was dead silent. It was so oppressive that people could not breathe. How could they expect that Lin Sun made such a big noise in the bloodthirsty battlefield, which was famous for its dangerous and bloody during the half-a-year silence? He killed half-step king beings with a bow. He galloped on the battlefield with his own strength and deterred the enemies. He got so many military merits that he ranked third on the military merit list. His name was even written in the third place on the bloodthirsty wanted list. The most incredible thing was that bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye forced the voodoo barbarian camp to stop the war with a pair of bows and arrows in Lin Sun's hands. This string of brilliant achievements and deeds were simply like numerous thunderbolts that caused the great figures of the Zhua and Qin clans to feel as if it was unreal, and they were completely stunned on the spot. On the other hand, the expression of the attendant that reported the news was tense since a long time ago, and his entire body was drenched in sweat while he shivered. The atmosphere in the hall was too deathly silent and oppressive, and it caused him to feel as if he was on the verge of suffocation. This allowed him to acutely realize that the news he reported had greatly shocked all these great figures present here. At this moment, their feelings must be extremely bad. This boy is really a monster. After a long time, the patriarch of Qin family sighed with mixed emotions, and it was hard to tell whether it was admiration or disgust. After that, he took a deep breath and said, "Everyone, there's no need to worry. He will leave the Empire in the end and head to the ancient desolation domain. The more heaven-defying he is, the more dangerous the trials and setbacks he will suffer, and he might die at any moment." All the big shots nodded silently. At this moment, they could only comfort him in this way. Boom! But right at this moment, another unexpected event occurred. An enormous bang that shook the heavens suddenly resounded from outside the hall. Someone dares to break into the gate of Qin family. The patriarch of Qin family stood up immediately with his beard fluttering. Because of Lin Sun today, his mood was extremely bad. But now, there was a sudden change in front of the gate of Qin family. It seemed that someone was going to break in. How could he not be angry? I like to see who is so daring. For so many years, as the two top forces, we have never had such a thing happen. But now there are twists and turns. Do you really think that we are easy to bully? All the big shots present were also annoyed. Like the patriarch of Qin family, they had long been angry because of Lin Sun. At this moment, they completely exploded. They needed to vent, otherwise they would be suffocated. Patriarch, something bad has happened. Outside the hall, some attendants ran in a panic with a sad face, as if the sky had fallen. A bunch of trash. Why are you so panicky? What a scandal. The patriarch of Qin family was so angry that he wanted to kick these bastards to death. They were too impatient and shameful. If it was spread out, they would be laughed at by the whole empire. However, the next moment, his face changed greatly, as if he had been struck by lightning. He cried out involuntarily, How could it be you?" At this moment, he was no better than those panicky attendants, which showed how out of control he was at this moment. Not only him, but also all the big shots in the hall at this moment looked incredible. They stared at the outside of the hall in surprise and doubt. Outside the hall, there stood a graceful and slender figure in a black crane cloak with a long black bun. Her eyes were bright, her red lips were moist, and her teeth were sparkling. She was so charming that she could topple a city. Standing there was a kind of peerless elegance. Zhao Xingye, the only female general of the empire, with the title of Bloodthirsty Queen, was absolutely a terrifying figure among the kings. She fought in the bloodthirsty battlefield all year round. Even if she rarely appeared in the empire, the rumors about her never disappeared. Especially these big shots present They all knew very well that Zhao Xingye had another identity. That was the sister of the current emperor. Such a beautiful woman with a terrifying cultivation, abnormal strength, and a lofty status had stepped forcefully into the Qin clan's mountain gate in the middle of the night. Why had she come? Lin Sun? Soon, some big shots exclaimed, and their eyeballs almost fell out. They saw a handsome young man standing not far behind Zhao Xingye. It was Lin Sun. All of a sudden, all the big shots in the hall were restless, and they looked as if they had seen a ghost. Who would have thought that the young man they hated most would appear in front of them like this? Why did he come here? Did he want to take revenge by using Zhao Xingye's power? Coincidentally, the same thought appeared in the minds of these big shots of Zhou and Qin family, and their faces became gloomy. They had found various reasons to comfort themselves that as long as Lin Sun entered the ancient desolation territory, he would no longer be a threat to them. But who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, the young man who gave them headaches and fear came to them like this? This was simply a joke of fate. Chapter 764. In the bloodthirsty battlefield, Zhao Xingye had promised Lin Sun that he would take Lin Sun with him when he went to the Qin family to demand an explanation. Tonight, Zhao Xingye and Lin Sun came together. But it was obvious from the astonished reactions of the big shots of the Qin family that Qin Shu, the king of life and death, didn't tell them what he had promised in the bloodthirsty battlefield. However, it didn't matter. Lin Sun came here to see how Zhao Xingye would slaughter the Qin family. He didn't need to worry about other things. An hour later, Lin Sun left the Qin family with Zhao Xingye with a satisfied smile on his face. Behind them, there were bursts of angry roars mixed with the sound of broken teacups, which could be heard from far away. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing again. Just in the previous negotiation, when the big shots of the Qin family heard that Qin Shu wanted to contribute all the wealth and strength of the Qin family to the empire, they were so angry that they almost went crazy. But in front of Zhao Xingye, they didn't dare to act rashly. Although they were extremely angry, they could only bear it. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing at the thought of their gloomy and sullen faces. In the end, under Zhao Xingye's rude and unreasonable attitude, the Qin family had to pay a heavy price for it. In addition to tens of millions of gold coins and 100,000 high-rank spiritual crystals, Qin family promised to dispatch an elite army of tens of thousands of people to the bloodthirsty battlefield to fight for the empire. The price was too high. Even if the Qin family was an upper-class aristocratic force, it was no different from cutting off a piece of flesh from its body. "Little guy, are you satisfied?" Zhao Xingye asked with a faint smile. His red lips were full, his teeth were sparkling, and his eyes were big and charming. Alas, Qin Shu failed to fulfill his promise after all. Lin Sun sighed. Zhao Xingye rolled his eyes at him and said, "You should be content. After all, the Qin family is an upper-class aristocratic force. Even I can't go too far. If you want the Qin family to contribute all their wealth and strength, unless what? Unless you have the power of the king realm." This, Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and said after a while, "It seems that I can only solve this problem by myself. Then I'll wait for your good news." Zhao Xingye didn't think much of it. With the power of the king realm, Lin Sun should at least embark on the road to pass the test and live a long life. With his current cultivation, Lin Sun was still far from this goal. According to her speculation, it would take at least 100 years for Lin to achieve this goal, even if there were no risks or obstacles on the road of cultivation. Lin Sun smiled and said no more. Indeed, it was a little early to say these things, but if he really had the power to overthrow the Zhou and Qin families in the future, he would never be polite to them. Heart-cleansing peak. After defeating Qin Zhe and extorting a large sum of compensation from Qin family with Zhao Xingye, Lin Sun lived in seclusion and rarely showed up in public. He was preparing to go to the ancient desolation domain. Wordless pagoda, broken blade, insignificant spiritual bow, blue sky arrow. These treasures must be carried with me. Lin Sun was counting the treasures he had collected over the years. He was shocked when he counted them. He didn't expect that he had accumulated so many treasures over the years.